Over the next couple videos, we're going to dive into the CloudKit specific versions of the new concurrency system introduced in Swift 5.5. Now, this is a huge topic, so big in fact that it's going to be released over multiple years, multiple Swift versions. So in this first part of the video, I'm going to give you a little bit of the backstory, the history, or at least point you to where you can learn more about it and tell you the big reasons like why this is even taking place. Okay, so as you can see here, I have a GitHub repo called the Swift Concurrency Manifesto. And if you notice, this was written by Chris Latner. For those that don't know, Chris Latner is no longer at Apple, but he was at Apple in a big part of the creation of Swift itself. So him writing this is straight from the source, if you will. So the contents, you can see, huge document, right? I'm going to scroll through this super fast. Look how big this is, ridiculous. So this is only for you if you really want to do a deep dive into learning about this new system, the motivations behind it, all that stuff, right? And like I said, it's broken into multiple Swift releases, right? Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, Part 4, Part 5. I think we got Part 1 and 2, so async await and actors in Swift 5.5. I believe the rest of it is coming in a later version. But again, I wanted to point you to the Swift Manifesto in case you are curious, you want to do a deep dive, right? You get the history of what concurrency used to be like, and again, the goals and the mission, all that stuff. And the roadmap here, the next one. And by the way, you can see this is October of 20, right? So this has been talked about for well over a year. They've been working on it for a long time. This is a big deal. This is a big update to Swift. But you can see the roadmap again if you want to read through this. But I really wanted to point out, right, the introduction of these features will span multiple Swift releases. Features will be introduced broadly in 2 phases. So I believe Swift 5.5 was phase 1, essentially, right? Because the first phase introduces the async syntax and actor types. That's what we just got. The second phase will enforce full actor isolation, eliminating data races, yada, 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 more stuff. Again, just pointing you to this if you want to see, code examples, all this stuff, right? I want to give you the history behind this big change. And if you really want to dive even deeper, here's the WWDC 21 videos. Again, this was just released officially like a week ago. So that's the other context, right? Is nobody has years of experience dealing with async await in Swift, right? All the best practices maybe haven't been figured out quite yet. If you're wondering how I learned it, especially with CloudKit, because the CloudKit stuff is pretty niche, right? If you want to learn async await for just regular network calls, there's all kinds of blog posts, videos, all that stuff. CloudKit, however, is pretty niche. So I had to watch these WWDC videos, dive into the documentation, dive into the Apple sample code on the CloudKit stuff. So that's how I learned it. I wanted to say that because I get asked all the time, how do you even learn this stuff? Well, that's how, when it's in a niche area where there's not already tons of articles out there. Anyway, here are the WWDC videos if you want to dive into, right? You can see it got 5 or 6. That's how big of a topic this is. I would recommend starting with Meet Async Await. And scroll down, you see we get also what's new in CloudKit. And I recommend watching this one as well if you're taking this course because we're not dealing with quote unquote normal network calls in async await. All of our network calls are done through the CloudKit API. So what's new in CloudKit, I would recommend watching, right? Because it says discover how you can unravel your threads with support from async await and convenience API additions. Those are the 2 main things we're going to deal with. Async await versions and new convenience API additions. We'll dive into that later, but I would recommend watching that. Okay, so all this to say, here's the history. Here's why they're doing it. Here's some resources you can watch. The benefits now. So the benefits is your code is going to be easier to read, which you're going to see. And this new async await system abstracts away a lot of errors that was easy to make when writing the old way of doing asynchronous code, which was typically with completion handlers. We're going to go through that as we refactor our network calls. But remember, those are the 2 main motivations. Make the code easier to understand, abstract away a lot of the common errors into the language. Okay, let's dive into some code. Here I am in the CloudKit manager, and as you can see, we have get user record, get locations, we have a bunch, right? There's 7 or 8, 9, 10, whatever. We're going to refactor all of these. I say that to let you know that we're going to get plenty of practice and repetition. However, they all have little different nuances to them. So it's not like we're doing the same thing 8 times. Each of these network calls is different in and of themselves. So it's a great way to learn async await, especially in the CloudKit context, because you're going to get a lot of practice at it. So I guess I want to say that if I do the first one and you're not quite following, you don't quite get it, we're about to do 8 more of them. So hopefully by the end of that, you'll get it. Okay, so what I'm going to do for the first one here, this user record function, I'm going to copy and then comment it out. That way you can still see the old version, right? We can compare and contrast. I'm not going to do that for every one, just this first one. So let's go through line by line. We're going to convert this function to use async await. So the first thing is the function signature. The first thing we need to do is mark it async and throws. Now, what does this do? Well, marking it async allows us to use the new async await system. Marking it throws say, hey, this will throw an error. And this throws keyword forces us to handle the error. And that's a big deal because before we had to handle every single possible exit of our function. Maybe this isn't a good example. Let's go to get locations, right? Where we're calling our completion handler, right? Like if we forget to call our completion handler here, right? If the records doesn't equal that, well, nothing's going to happen. Like the code's going to execute. We're not going to show an error. The app's not going to work. The user doesn't know what's going on. Like the app just hangs. It's like a bad user experience. So this is a simple one where we only have completed that failure case and completed that success case. But in other network calls, when you're handling multiple different errors, there may be 5, 6, 7 potential exits from the function that you have to make sure you cover all of them by calling the completion handler. That's the old way. So the new way, again, by marking this throws and not using a completion handler, now this forces us to handle the error somehow. So this completely eliminates that whole genre of bugs where you forget to call a completion handler somewhere. So that's benefit number one. So now let's start using this. Well, first things first, because we're going to use this container.default, let me do some refactoring real quick here. We'll do let container equals ck container.default, right? That way we can just call container dot instead of container.default. Nothing to do with async await, just a quick little refactor I want to do because we're going to be rewriting all these network calls. So to use async await, we no longer mess with these optionals, right? This closure method or completion handler method, right? We would get back a record ID or an error, and they were both optional. So I had to unwrap the optionals, handle both cases, yada, yada, yada. It was very tedious. Well, now we're not dealing with optionals in async await. So what I can do is let record, I'm going to dive into the code as I go, equals try await, because we're in this new awaitable version, container, and that's just the same thing as ck-container.default. I just abstracted that away. Dot, and you can see we get new async throws methods. These are all new methods in Swift 5.5. Quick note on that, this async await stuff requires iOS 15. So if you have to support iOS 14 or iOS 13, I mean, you can still use this, but you have to use conditional code, meaning you have to write code where it says, if available in iOS 15, do this code. Else do this code. So you're basically writing everything twice. So it's very common to not implement stuff that requires iOS 15 until you can have that be your minimum deployment target. That way you're not writing everything twice. Just a little side note there. But again, the way you know we have new async stuff is it's marked async throws. So this is all new functions in Swift 5.5. So you can see the whole point of this function here is to fetch the user record ID, and it gives us back a record ID. Well, you see on container, I have container dot user record ID. And if you see down here, it returns CK record ID. Cool. That's it. We either get back a record ID or it throws the error. That's it. So I can delete all of this code right here. And then now the next bit of code, very similar, right? Where I'm fetching the record with a record ID. And you can see I get back a user record and error. They're both optional. I got to unwrap the optionals. It's a very tedious dance that we no longer have to do. And async await really shines when you're doing nested network calls like this, because now look what I can do. I do let record, oops, I'm sorry, I misnamed this. This should be record ID up here, and this should just be record. Sorry for the confusion. It is now try await container dot public cloud database dot record 4. And you can see this takes in a record ID and it returns a CK record. So the record ID I want to pass in is the record ID we got up here on line 44, right? So record ID. Again, we're doing the same thing. It's just a much cleaner, neater syntax, right? So I can get rid of all of this now. So now that I have the record, and again, like I said, if this fails and gets an error, it's just going to throw. And we handle the throw at the call site in a do try catch block. We'll get to that in a bit. But now that I have a record, I can make my user record equal record. And by the way, user record, just to refresh your memory, is our user record that we're keeping here in profile ID. So now, and I don't even need to use self because I'm not in a closure anymore. So we can make this look neater. And now that I have this record, remember I renamed this record, not user record. A little slight renaming there. Sorry for any confusion there. So now I'm still doing the same thing here where I'm getting the profile reference from the record. So this code doesn't change, except I don't need to use self anymore because I'm not in a closure. Now, when doing this copy paste stuff, I keep the extra curly braces. So I'm gonna highlight that, Control I. You can see I got 2 extra curly braces down here. I can delete. That's from all the closure stuff we were dealing with before. So now look at this function, and I'll run through it real quick. But it went from this with unwrapping all these optionals, kind of confusing, to pretty straightforward, right? So I have my function signature of get user record. It's marked async, and it throws. So again, async is so I can use the new async await system. Throw, say, hey, this does throw an error. So we try to get the record ID by using the container.userRecordID. If that fails, throw an error. If it succeeds, cool, I have a record ID. Now we're doing another network call down here where I try to get the record, right? So try await container.public cloud database, get record for record ID. If that fails, it's going to throw an error. If it succeeds, cool, now I have a record. And then I'm taking that record, setting it equal to the user record that is on our CloudKit manager that we use throughout other things, and also doing the same thing for profile record ID. So it reads top to bottom, reads super nice, easy to understand and see what's going on, and it abstracted away like a lot of potential errors. Now let's talk about the call site. So where are we using get user record? Search for it real quick. Get user record. Okay, not in Cloud Command. Okay, app tab view, right? This is on launch. We're getting the user record. So you see I have an error here. Async call in a function that does not support concurrency. So another change, this is Swift UI, is instead of on appear, we now have something called .task. Do Command B, which will give us an async context, but we still need to do more stuff here. But the big point of task here is it will replace on appear when you're making a network call when a screen appears, which happens quite often. We do that a lot in our app. Task is basically tailor-made for that situation. So you want to replace on appear with task when you're doing that. And a benefit of that is one, it gives you the async context. And two is if the user navigates away from your screen while the network call is still happening, it automatically cancels that network call for you. You don't have to do that manually. So to put it simply, if you're doing a network call on appear, or what on appear would have been, now you want to use task. Now, if you remember on get user record, we're not handling the error intentionally, right? Because we're just kind of doing this in the background. So because we're not handling the error intentionally, we can do try with a question mark, optional, await. And when we mark try with a question mark for optional, if this fails, it'll just return nil. It's not going to return our error. You'll see in future ones, we're going to do a do, try, catch where we handle the error and all that stuff. But even though we're throwing errors, we chose as a product decision not to handle the errors. Like I don't want to pop up an alert in this case. We're just doing this in the background, like we mentioned before earlier in the course. So our call sites won't always be this nice and clean one-liner, but this is a super simple example. Again, we're going to do like 8 more network calls to build on this. So if you're a little leery right now, hopefully over the next bunch, you'll start to get it. But that is our get user record, which in CloudKit Manager is now down to this. From this, I'm going to delete this code just to clean it up, but I recommend maybe keeping this so you can kind of compare and contrast. You can look at each line of code and see what it was doing the old way and how you're doing it the new way. I think that's very helpful. But for me, I'm going to delete this now. And then we're just going to start refactoring the rest of these. And again, a lot of it will be repetition, which is great when you're learning a new thing, but each one has its own little twist on it that adds another layer of complexity that I think is very helpful. Okay, so the first thing I do is look at the function signature, right? So what is the point of this function, get locations? It's to return an array of locations. Remember, up here on our get user record, we weren't returning anything. This is where it's a little different. Like I said, a new twist gets added each time. So let's delete our completion handler, but remember, we need to return an array of DDG location. So we'll delete that, and then we'll go async throws, but we're returning an array of DDG location. So that's our function signature. And again, the big thing to remember is we're not dealing with optionals. It's either going to return an array of DDG locations or it's throwing an error, right? We're not dealing with optionals. That's a great thing. So these next 3 lines are building our query. None of that has changed, right? We're just building our query with a sort descriptor. That's all the same. Where things get different is our new performing of a query function. So you see, this is where it was deprecated and I didn't fix it because we're completely rewriting it. So I'm going to write out this line. You may be confused, but we're going to go back and review it because we're going to deal with tuples a lot. So async await deals a lot with tuples. So if you don't have a ton of experience with tuples, get used to them if you're going to use async await because you're going to use them a lot. So I'm going to do let tuple of match results and then comma cursor, that's what it returns now, equals. I'm going to walk through this code in a second. It's better for me to type out the whole thing and then explain it. Try await container, and again, container is just ckcontainer.default that we just refactored out, dot public cloud database, and then instead of perform, we do records matching. And you can see matching takes in a query. So that's what we want to do. We want to pass in the query that we created up here on line 34. So far, very similar. But here's where it gets different. Let me option click into records matching, open in developer documentation. You can see here, and we'll dive into this in future network calls, but another big change with Swift 5.5 and iOS 15 is, remember we had to drop down to CK operation when we wanted more customization with desired keys, result limits, batch saving. Well, a lot of that has been built into the convenience API. So we no longer have to drop down to CK operation anymore. We're going to do that in our future network calls, but that is why you see parameters of results limits, desired keys now. That is built into the convenience API. You see they have a default value of nil or like maximum results. So they're given default values so we don't always have to use them, but they are there when we need them, and we will need them later. The main thing I wanted to talk about is what this records matching function returns. I'll make this a little bigger here. So we can see it. So it returns a matched results tuple. This parentheses means it's a tuple. And what matched results is an array of another tuple. It gets a little confusing, but again, we're going to get a lot of practice with this. And it also returns a cursor. Remember, we had to use CK operation to get a cursor before when we want like the next 100 items. That's all built in too. Again, we're going to deal with that later. But the point is, it returns match results and a cursor. Match results is an array of another tuple, that's the CK record ID, and then the result, which is either the error or the CK record. So this is the extra little step that's a bit confusing because we have to dig into this result to get what we want. But again, we're going to get plenty of practice. So back to the code here. That's why I'm returning this tuple of match results and cursor. However, we're not going to use the cursor, so I'm going to give it the underscore because we're not going to use it. If we kept that name there, we would get the warning that says you're not using cursor. So we're going to do that right now. So I'm only worried about match results, which again is our array of a tuple of CK record ID and the result. So what we have to do, like I mentioned before, just to refresh your memory here, is we're going to be digging into this result type right here. That's another big change in the CloudKit API. They're heavily relying on this new result type. I say new, I think it was new in Swift 5, relatively newer result type. They refactored everything to heavily use this. So get used to using result type as well. So we want to dig in and pull out this CK record. Now the syntax I'm about to write is tricky. I had never seen it before. And where I got this from was straight from Apple's source code. I mean, I understand how it works now, but if you don't quite get this or you're like, what? That was my reaction too. But again, straight from Apple source code, which like I mentioned is how I had to learn this stuff, right? Because there's not tons of articles and blog posts and stuff out about CloudKit async await. So let's write this confusing looking line of code and then I'll explain it. Okay, so this is let records. So this is us pulling out the array of records equals match results. Because remember, match results was the array of a tuple that has CK record ID and something called result. So .compact map, remember compact map is basically the same as map, except it filters out anything that's a nil. That's going to be important. I'll explain that in a second. So I want to get open and close curly braces. So this first part is me iterating through every item in the match results, which again is the CK record ID and the result, which again, I know I've done this a bunch now, but I want to be clear. You can see match result is an array. The first item in the tuple, CK record ID. The second item in the tuple is the result. So this could say, record ID and then comma result for me to iterate through that. But again, we're not using the record ID, so that's why I went with the underscore. We do in try result.get. Okay, we'll walk through this. So we do Command B. Oh, the try needs to be a question mark. That's where the nil comes into play. Again, I'll explain. Okay, so this line of code is good. So what I'm doing here is in match results, compact map. So again, map is like iterating through the array. Compact map just filters out all the nils. So for each result, try to do result.get. Well, what does .get do? So option click into .get, open developer documentation. It says returns the success value as a throwing expression. So remember, result either returns a success, which is the value, or an error. So this goes and gets the success value, and if it can't get it, it will throw the error. Now, remember what I said, when you mark something try with a question mark, when it throws an error, it just returns a nil. So this is basically saying like, if I can't get the actual record, just give me a nil. And then we're filtering out the nils with compact map. Again, there's a lot going on in this one line of code. And like I said before, we're going to use this line of code in pretty much every network call, and I'm going to explain it every time. So this is going to be explained to you like 5 more times. Hopefully you'll get it. But one more time, match results, compact map. For each result, go in there and try to do result.get, which gets the success case, which in our case is a record. If it can't get the record, it's going to return a nil, but we're filtering out all the nils. So our records array is eventually, after we dig in and get the records, just an array of records. So that replaces this line, right? We're performing the query, we get back an array of records, right? That's what this whole bunch does. So that replaces that. And then now, basically this is the same, right? Where I'm doing let locations equals records.map. We're initializing locations from that. And I'm not calling the completion handler anymore. And what I could do is just return locations. But what I'm going to do to save, a line of code is just return this, right? Instead of making it a variable, then returning that variable, I'm just going to return the array of DDG locations. So do Command B. I think I'm going to have like an extra curly brace somewhere. Yep. Again, when I'm doing that copy and paste from all that stuff, the curly braces get out of control. So our function now looks like this, right? Get locations, it's marked async. We're going to throw errors, and if it's successful, give me an array of DDG location. So this sort descriptor and query, same thing. We're building our query. This new function here that we're going to use a lot, this is how you fetch records now in CloudKit. So we're going to use this a bunch, right? So we get records matching the query. And again, this records matching returns a match result and a cursor. We're not using the cursor in this one. We'll use that in a later one where we get like the next 100 results. But the match results is what we care about. That returns an array of tuples of a CK record ID and a result. And we're going to dig into this result. That's what this try result.get. We dig into that result type to pull out the records. If this fails, it returns a nil, and that's why compact map filters out the nils to give us a clean array of records. Once we have the clean array of location records, now we can do records.map to initialize our DDG location object from that record, and that's what we return to give us the array of locations. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Like I said, we're gonna get a lot more practice doing very similar stuff. But now let's go to the call site. I'll search for get locations, and that's in our location map view model. So here it is. Okay, so now here's where we're gonna use the do, try, catch. But I'm going to review this real quick to refresh your memory and compare it to with what we're doing now. So in the old completion handler way, I had to have a closure, right, where I had to do like the self dance. Sometimes you do weak self. We don't have to do that anymore. You see I'm routing it to the main thread. That gets handled. We'll talk about that in a second. And then I got to handle the success and failure case. So the new way isn't necessarily a lot less code, but it's a lot less error prone. So I'm going to comment this out again just to have that for reference. I'll delete it afterwards. So like I said, I want to do the do, and then we want to do try, await, and then we want to call the network call here. So CloudKit manager.shared.get locations. Now you see, why is it gray? It says async get locations used in a context that does not support concurrency. Well, I'm going to hit OK anyway, but we need to have a context that supports concurrency. So the way to do that quickly is task, just wrap it in a task. So we'll cut this up here, paste that there. So now do Command B, that should work fine. Result of call to get locations is unused. Oh yeah, this returns an array of DDG locations. And if you look down here in the old success case, right? I won't highlight it because you can't see it, but we did location manager.locations equals locations. So we need to set location manager.locations equal to the result of this. And if that fails, that goes into the catch block. And what are we going to do in the catch block? Well, we're going to do the same error handling here. So I'm actually going to copy that and paste that there, right? Alert item equals alert context, unable to get locations. So it's doing the same thing. This is basically the success case and the failure case. However, we don't have to do the weak self dance. And you see, we routed it to the main thread. I'll uncomment that so you can see it, that dispatch queue.main.async. Well, I said that gets handled for you, but we still have to do one thing. And that's the new actors that we were talking about. So if we mark something as main actor, which we're going to do for our overall location map view model. So I'll do @main actor. Command B. Now, what this means is any UI update, so all of our published variables that happen on this class will automatically get routed to the main thread. Again, they're abstracting common errors into the language. So now down here in our network call, which is up here, when we are setting our location manager.locations to the result of our network call, and that updates the UI, that happens automatically on the main thread because we are a main actor. Okay, so let's run this and test it. And it should be working like as expected. And yeah, we got our locations as expected. Here they show up in our location list as well. So that's the other thing when you're refactoring your network calls. You're not going to notice a difference in behavior. It's just, is it working as expected? Cool. So that network call is refactored and good to go on get locations. So now if we go back to the CloudKit manager, we're going to do one more in this video, and that is the get checked in profiles. So I'm going to start moving a little quicker here because again, we're doing a lot of the same stuff. So look, the result of this is I am returning a DDG profile. A difference here is we're actually passing in a location ID, but still I want to delete the completion handler. And instead of returning void, I return an array of DDG profile. And again, I got to mark this async await. Async throws. That's my new function signature. Oops, I got to delete that parentheses. Now do a Command B, make sure no errors. Well, these are expected errors, the completion handler stuff. So again, here we're creating our predicate, which is building our query. None of that changes. That's all the same. We want to replace this perform query. And again, remember the way you perform queries now is basically records matching query. So we're going to use that same thing. So like I said, it returns a tuple. So let match results. Get used to typing this. We're going to type this a lot. We don't need a cursor. Again, we will in future network calls, but for now we don't. Try, await, container.public database.records matching our query that we've already built up here on line 46. Now we have the confusing code. which I'm just going to copy and paste, but I'll walk through it again because like I said, I want repetition on this one specifically. So match results gives me, go into records, right? You can see here an array of a tuple, which the first item in that tuple is the CK record ID. The second item is a result, and we want to dig into the result to get the CK record, right? And it's an array, so we're going to do that multiple times for how many records we have. So that's what we're doing here. Let records equals match results.compact map, which filters out the nils. We're not messing with the CK record ID. We don't need that. We only want to dig into the result type, which again, the result type success is our record. If it failures, it's an error. So that's what result.get does. It gives us a success case. And if it's an error, it will throw. But because we mark try with an optional, when it throws an error, it's just going to return nil. And if it returns nil, that's why we're using compact map, so we can filter out those nils. So our array of records is just a clean array of successful records. So we can delete this code because I just did all that. And then just like we did before, how we returned records.map, we can return records.map, which initializes our DDG profiles from that. So return that, get rid of our completion handler there, clean this up a little bit, good to go. Again, so this is very similar to what we just did. In fact, almost exact. I believe I have a extra curly brace. Again, part of the old code. Okay, Command B, everything's good. Now we just need to change the call site a little bit, and the call site's a little different for this one. And the reason I'm searching for these, by the way, normally you would go here and go to callers, but we changed the function signature, so it's not going to find the callers. So I'm going to do get checked in profiles. Ooh, there's a lot. Yes, here we are. Okay, so now we got a loading view to deal with, which we'll handle. So again, I want a task to put me in the async context. Then I do a do. And then what's the success case of the old way? We want to set checked in profiles equal to the profiles we get back. So I'm going to do checked in profiles equals try await CloudKit manager.share.get checked in profiles for, and we pass in the same thing, right? Location.id, right? Same thing we passed in right here. But now again, we're not dealing with self. We're not routing to the main thread. I got to make sure this is marked main actor before I do that. But anyway, in the catch block, I want to basically do the same alert, right? If this fails for whatever reason, show this alert. Cool. So now I can delete all this, except I need to remember to handle the loading view and handle the routing to the main thread, which is just by marking this as main actor. So the downside to this is I have to call hide loading view in both places. So little minor downside. And the reason being is because, I can't call it like after this all executes because this takes time. And then if it like the timing of this is what messes it up and why I have to call this both places. Minor downside. Overall, the pros greatly outweigh the cons. Okay, and then let me make sure our view model itself is marked main actor. So all these UI updates get routed to the main thread automatically. So at main actor. Okay, we have two more errors. Where's that at? What's going on here? I guess we're calling this again. Oh, no. Okay, so here in our location list view, we're calling something that's on the main actor here we don't have that context, right? Because this isn't marked main actor. I could mark this function itself at main actor, right, to solve that. But I'm going to need main actor on this location list view model anyway, because of this future network call that we're going to handle in another video. So I'm going to have to mark this main actor anyway overall. So instead of marking just this function main actor, I might as well mark the whole thing. If I didn't have to do this, then I maybe would just mark the function main actor. But we're going to mark it overall main actor to solve those errors. Okay, so that was our get checked in profile network call. So I'm going to run the app, and then when I go to location list, I should see my checked in people all the same. Yep, there we go. Cool. That working as expected. Okay, stop that. Now, okay, this video is long. We got more network calls to go, so I'm definitely breaking this up into more videos, but hopefully you're starting to get the hang of it. And again, even if you're not, we got like 6 more to do. So we're going to get plenty of practice. So we left off last video introducing you to the concurrency, and then we refactored our get user record. We refactored get locations. We refactored get checked in profiles. See how nice and neat these look now? Well, here we have get checked in profiles dictionary. And if you remember, this is the one where we are using the cursor, right? You see how we have the cursor here. And then if the cursor is there, recursively running another network call, which is down here, this continue with checked in profiles. So this is us doing that recursive one. Remember, this was a big function. We had all the printed out, statements to see everything. So fair warning, this one's going to be a lot. We're going to refactor both of these into the async await, and it's going to be a little jumbled because we're doing things in both functions, but hopefully at the end, I can run through it to help you understand it. So the main thing to know here is how we had to do a CK operation, right, to do all this stuff. And the reason we did that was because we were dealing with the cursor, where we were setting result limits, right? Remember, CK operation used to be the way you did highly customized stuff. The convenience API was for the super basic stuff. Well, the convenience API has gotten a lot more powerful, and we no longer have to do CK operations for this, where we have the operation fetch record block, right? That you do all this stuff, and then you have the query completion block. We no longer have to do all that, which this is all the stuff that was like deprecated. That's what I was talking about. Why I didn't want to fix those warnings, because we're just completely getting rid of this. Okay, let's start this journey together. As always, the function signature remains the same, right? We are deleting our completion handler, but let's pay attention to what we return, right? So the success case for this is we return a dictionary of CK record ID, and that's the key, and the value of the dictionary is an array of DDG profiles. Remember, that's how we're seeing who's checked in where. Is we have our CK record ID is the record ID for each location, and each location has an array of DDG profiles. Quick refresher for those that may be coming back to the course. So let's make sure we return this. So I'm actually going to copy that before I delete, right? So we're going to delete the whole completion handler, get that out of here, mark it async and throws, and return the dictionary. Whoops, I had a little extra bracket there. Careful with the copy and paste. So we're returning a dictionary where the key is the CK record ID and the value is an array of dictionaries. And again, I forgot the square bracket at the end for the overall dictionary. Again, copy, paste. It'll get you every time. Be careful. All right, I'm going to go basically down the line. We're going to get rid of these print statements. I'm going to put new ones in when we test it, but just to avoid confusion. So this predicate we're creating that's building up our query, same thing. Nothing changes there. And remember, we're doing the is checked in nil check. Cover that in another video. But my point is, I do not need this operation, the CK query operation, right? We have this now built into the convenience API, so we no longer need to do that. I still want to keep a checked in profiles dictionary to build over time, right? So I still want that because we're going to build the dictionary after we get our results. But this operation fetch block. So before, this used to return individually. And as these were getting returned individually, we were creating a profile, creating a record ID, and building our dictionary here. So we're going to have to do this similar thing in a for loop, because we're going to get back all of our results at once rather than one at a time. So for those results, similar stuff, right? Match result. We do have a cursor this time, right? We are going to use the cursor. That's the big difference. Equals try await container.public database.records matching query. And again, this query is what we built up here. And the same thing as before, we need to dig into this match result, again, for the refresher, because this is a new video, right? This records matching returns this tuple of a match result, which again is an array of another tuple that has a CK record ID and a result. And that result, we want to dig in and get the CK record. This is the same stuff we've done the past two network calls, but I know this is a new video, so just a refresher in case it's been a day or two. So we want this same line of code. And I'm copying and pasting it because it's a tricky line of code to write, a lot of weird syntax, but I'll review it again because maybe it's been a little bit. We're getting an array of records. Oh, the name, I named it match result. I didn't put an S there. That's why the naming didn't match up. Again, sometimes copy and paste helps. So records, match results, .compact map. Remember, compact map filters out the nils. So this would be record ID, right? Because that's what it is. It's an array of tuples where the tuple has a record ID and a result. We're just not using the record ID, so that's why we do that. In that result, we want to dig in and get the success case of the result. That's what get does. And if get fails or returns an error, that's why we have try marked with a question mark, because instead of throwing an error, it just returns nil. And again, that's why we're using compact map to filter out the nils. So we have a clean array of just the records with no nils, no errors, no nothing. Okay, hopefully that was review. We've done that a few times now. Now we need to recreate this. So I have an array of records. So really, I just want to do a for loop, because remember, this was getting returned one at a time. So it's kind of like a for loop anyway. So I'll do for record in records, which is this array of records that we just pulled out. And I essentially want to do this same code. So I'm going to cut that code actually to not have confusion. We can delete this, right? Because for each record, I want to create a profile, right? Our profile object. And then I want to get a location reference, because that location reference is going to have the record ID of the location, which is how we're building this dictionary up here, right? Remember this dictionary, every location is going to have its individual location ID, and each location ID is going to have an array of DDG profiles, right? This is review. If you are coming back and you're not quite sure what's going on here, I recommend reviewing that video in the original course. I'm not going to rehash that, but that's how we're building that dictionary. So it's the same thing, right? The difference is I can't just return, right? Because remember, this function returns this dictionary. So I don't want to return here. And remember, this line of code is just in case there is no location reference here. So instead of return, I just want to do continue. If you're not familiar with the continue keyword, the continue keyword in a for loop basically just says, if it hits this continue, it says, okay, go to the next iteration. Don't run anything past here. So this line of code won't execute. Basically what happens, it goes to the record. It'll say, oh, I don't have a location reference. Okay, just continue on with the iterations. Don't run this line of code. I only want to run this line of code to build the dictionary if everything's good to go. Okay, so we just recreated what we were doing in the individual completion block that we had. So now this operation doesn't even exist anymore, so I can get rid of that. However, we do still need to handle when we have a cursor. So the first thing I want to do is make sure I have a cursor. So guard let cursor equals cursor else. Now I do want to return our checked in profiles. Let me reiterate what this means here. So I'm checking to make sure I have a cursor. If I don't have a cursor, right, if cursor is nil, then I will return my checked in profiles dictionary that I've been building, right? In this for loop, we build this dictionary. And if we don't have a cursor, cool, we're done. Return the dictionary. If we have a cursor, we got to do more stuff. And that's what we'll do here. So I'm gonna do Command B. I got a lot of errors. I'm not sure what's going on here. I think I got some curly brace issues here that we'll clean this code up. In fact, I'm going to delete all this code just to get rid of all these errors because it throws me off. We're going to rewrite all of that. So here, if we have a cursor, this is where we're going to run our continue get checked in profiles dictionary, right? We want to run this cursor version. If you remember, we pass in a cursor, passing in the dictionary, all that stuff. For now, because we got to shift to update this function before we can actually use it properly. So for now, to get Xcode to not yell at me, I'm just going to return an empty dictionary because remember, we have to return a dictionary of record ID or DGG profile. So again, that's just to get Xcode to stop giving me errors and freaking me out. We still have one error, but that's at the call site. So let me run through this function real quick before we do some similar stuff in this function and then tie it all together. So function signature, get checked in profiles dictionary. Remember, we're not dealing with a completion handler anymore. So we're either returning a dictionary of CK record ID and an array of DGG profiles, or we're throwing an error, right? Here we are building our query with a predicate. Same as before, we didn't change that. Same thing here. We have a dictionary. We're starting with this empty dictionary here that we're going to build as we get records back. So here is us querying for the records. Again, based on our predicate, we're only getting records back where is nil checked in equals 1. And then based on that records, right, we get this match results. We got to use this code to dig into the match results, pull out the results that we have, which gives us this clean array of records. Once we have that clean array of records, which are DDG profile records, we iterate through that array. We create a profile from it. And if there is a location reference, cool, we're going to add that to our dictionary down here and start building this dictionary, right, where everybody's checked into a certain location. However, if it's nil, we don't have that, we're just going to continue. Just continue on with the next iteration in this for loop and do not run this line of code. Cool, so that builds the dictionary. And then after we build the dictionary, we need to see if we have a cursor, right? Because if we have a cursor, that means there's more to download and we got to do that. If we don't have a cursor, we're done. We just return checked in profiles. Okay, and then now later on, we got to run this continue method down here. But now let's update this. Okay, so very similar stuff here, right? This is going to return in a dictionary of CK record ID and DGG profile. So I want to get rid of the completion handler and return that. So we'll mark this async throws and return. I'll copy and paste this here because it is the same thing, that dictionary in the success case. Okay, same thing. We'll go line by line. We still want the variable of checked in profiles. That is the dictionary that we passed in. And if you remember, we created this separate variable because when you pass something in, it's immutable, it's a let. We need it to be mutable because we're going to be adding stuff to it, right? We no longer need this operation and result limit, right? We're not using CK operations. We're using the convenience API. So speaking of that convenience API, let's actually use it. So again, similar code, let match results. And we are going to have a cursor potentially, right? If there's more and more, we may have a cursor equals try await container dot public cloud database dot records matching, and then whoops, we don't use records matching. Caught myself, right? Because this takes in a CK query. We need to pass in a cursor, right? Because we're getting the next array of records. So I'm going to go back dot records, and you see continuing match from, right? And you see here, this takes in a cursor and returns the same stuff. So this is what you want to use when you're using a cursor. So continuing match from, and you see it takes in a cursor. So we're going to pass in the cursor that we passed in up here, cursor. And then now we have this same line of code that I've been copying and pasting down here. Again, same stuff. We've done this like 4 times by now. But again, we want to dig into the records, which is in this tuple that is a CK record ID that we're not using, and a result. In that result has our record. We want to reach in there to get it If it's an error, we return nil. Compact map filters out the nils, gives us a clean array of records. Same stuff. And again, now that we have that array of records, we're literally doing this same exact for loop. So I'm going to copy that here. Remember this, I think I talked about this originally too when we did this the first time. These are very similar functions. However, they're just different enough that I felt like I wanted them to be separate rather than trying to combine them into the same one. Because again, we're passing in a cursor and a dictionary, but they are very similar. I'm sure there's ways to refactor this, but I didn't. So we can delete this fetch record block. Remember, this is the individual records as they come in, which is we get them all back at the same time now, and then we do a for loop to iterate through it. So get rid of that. We can get rid of this. And then now I'm going to get rid of all this because now we need to check to see if we have a cursor and then call this same function recursively if we do have a cursor. So same cursor check, guard let cursor equals cursor, else return. See, it tells me I got to return a dictionary. I'm going to return checked in profiles. So again, this is the same line of code. I'm going to put it on one line that we had before where I'm saying like, if the cursor's nil, that means there's no more stuff to download. So just return this checked in profiles. If the cursor's not nil, we got to download again. So now I'm going to call this function recursively, right? So we're going to call the function we just wrote here. So do return, try, await, CloudKit manager.share continue with checked in profiles dictionary. And the cursor we want to pass in, again, would be this cursor here if we have one. Remember, if we don't have one, we're just returning. And then the dictionary we pass in is our checked in profiles dictionary that we added on to right here. So we're adding on to that dictionary. And then if we have another cursor, we're passing that dictionary in. So the next function can add on to it if there is one. So checked in profiles. And then if this fails, right, we want to throw the error. Okay, so that is us recursively calling this function. And we want to do the same thing. So I'm going to copy this. This is what we want to do here. Instead of returning a dictionary, we're going to return the result of continuing with the cursor, or we're throwing an error if that fails. So let me do a command B that should get rid of some warnings here. And because we're only using this continue function here locally in this file, I'm going to mark it private. That way we can't accidentally use continue checked in outside of this, right? Because the thing that triggers all this events is when we call get checked in profiles dictionary. Okay, before we go to the call site, I know that was a lot. I was bouncing back and forth between two very similar functions that may have been confusing. So I'm gonna do a quick run through one more time. I know I've been doing that as I go, but like I said, repetition is key. Hopefully you really understand this by now. So like I said, function signature, mark it async, to use async await, throws to throw an error. We're returning a non-optional dictionary. Setting up the predicate in the query, that's the same, we didn't touch that. Same thing here, we want to keep this dictionary that we're going to build from our results. And here is where we are querying basically a bunch of records, matching our query that we have up here. This new records now returns a tuple, right, of match results and a cursor. Match results, like I said, is another array of tuples that has a CK record ID and the result in it. So now we want to dig into that result, right, and pull out the success case, filter out all the nils to give us a clean array of records, right? We're not using a CK record ID. Now that we have a clean array of records, go ahead and basically iterate through those records, create a profile. If there's a location reference, go ahead and build our dictionary based on that. If not, just continue on. Essentially what this for loop does is it builds our dictionary. And then after we've built the dictionary, hey, do we have a cursor? If we don't have a cursor, just return checked in profiles, we're done. If we do have a cursor, we continue on and do continue with checked in profiles where we pass in the cursor dictionary. And if that fails, we throw an error. And basically this continue with dictionary is the same logic. I won't review it again, but the difference is we're passing in a cursor and a dictionary, right? Because we need the cursor because we're calling a different convenience API on continue matching from, and we're passing in a dictionary to continue building. Other than that, it's the same. Now let's go to the call site here for checked in profiles dictionary to make sure this is running fine, right? So here we are in the location list view. This is what I marked main actor last time because I said we were going to come back for this. Well, here we are coming back for it. So before I delete that down there, let's do a task. What is the success case, right? We want to make checked in profiles equal to checked in profiles. And remember, checked in profiles is our published variable up here, which will update the UI. So I want to do checked in profiles equals try await cloud kit manager.shared get checked in profiles dictionary, right? That's what we did here. We don't have to route it to the main thread because we are marked main actor. That handles that for us. And then in the catch case, I'll copy this now. I just want to show this alert item. So catch and then paste that in there. And then we can delete this. We'll move this up here. And then let's make sure our profiles are showing up on our location list view. So let's go to the location list view. There you go. Profiles are still showing up. But did it work? Well, it didn't go into the cursor. We know that because there's only like 6 of them, right? So we know that's not it. So remember what we did last time. We'll go down to our functions here in our CloudKit manager. This is just for testing purposes. So, and it also shows off the new flexibility of the convenience API. So in Get Profiles Dictionary, right, records matching. Remember, I can use desired keys. I can use result limit, right? So I'm going to do result limit 1. That way it's only going to fetch 1 record and it's going to iterate. Remember, we did this before where we tested it. So I want to do that down here in our cursor one as well. Add a result limit of 1. So that way we can test the recursiveness of it. So how I'm going to do that is I'm going to put a print statement above the cursor here where I'm going to print. And then I like to use some emojis, like I said before. So I'm gonna do number 1, letting me know this is the initial version. And I'm gonna say checked in profiles equal checked in profiles. So basically this is gonna give me 1 record and it's gonna print it out. And then I'm going to change the print statement here to, instead of the 1, we'll do the circle for recursive, right? That's how the symbols work for me. So I know every time I see this, this is it being called recursively. And I'm going to go back and do this because remember, this same error is happening to me, or not error, but same issue, where I'll just do the check mark. I'll say fired off. Remember, on appear was getting fired off twice. And then even, let's actually go back to the location list view here. Views, screens, location list view. Even doing this, right? This on appear, we want to change to .task. In fact, I probably want to do that everywhere. I'm going to make this 1 line. So task. Let's actually do that real quick. Let's search for on appear. Cool. Location detail view on appear. We'll do .task because these are network calls. .task. And then back to the search on appear. Now there's 2 of them, profile view. And again, task is basically tailor-made for when you're doing a network call in on appear. So you're probably going to do that most of the time, to be honest. But okay, back to CloudKit Manager. The reason why I did print fired off, remember, it was firing off twice. On appear was getting called twice. Sometimes it got called twice, sometimes it didn't. I don't know, it was just an issue. I couldn't figure it out. But location list. Okay, cool. You see getting a ton of stuff. Okay, so I think it fired off twice. Yeah, it did. That's confusing. See, fired off, 111. But you can kind of go through here and see checked in profiles. I'll look at first name. So first name is dummy. And then on the first recursive one, now I have dummy and mock. And then it happened twice, right? Now I have dummy mock jobs, right? So the recursiveness is working, right? We've illustrated that before. I don't want to belabor the point too much, but let me delete these print statements. Now that we have proven that our recursiveness is working, make sure you go back and get rid of result limit because we definitely don't want to have result limit 1, especially if we have a ton of users. That'll be like, if we had like 100 users, that would be like 100 network calls going off. So make sure you definitely do that and getting rid of the print statements here as well. Okay, that was a big one. There's really only 2 functions, right? But I remember that was a very complex function we did using the cursor. So hopefully you understood that. If you have questions, please ask in the comments, ask in the Slack. Happy to help. But hopefully that made sense because it was a lot of repeat from what we've done before. Just adding that twist of the cursor was a little bit of a twist. But again, these functions are very similar in logic. They're doing a lot of the same stuff. But anyway, on to the next video where we finish up refactoring all of our network calls. I know it's been a lot. These have been long videos. But this is just the reality if you want to update your code base to the latest and greatest. All right, you still with me? I know this has been a lot. We're finishing off with some easy ones, right? So we're on the downhill towards the end here. But we left off with this big 2 functions where we're using the cursor and recursiveness, all that stuff. Now we're going to go get our checked in profiles.count, which again is still using CK operation. And the main reason we use CK operation with this one was because we needed desired keys. Because to refresh your memory, this is how we're showing the numbers on our badges. So we didn't want to download every single profile's avatar, right? We're trying to be more efficient because the avatars are pretty heavy. And if you're downloading 1,000 of them, it just makes it a big download. So we're only using desired keys to get just the isCheckedIn reference, again, to make our download small for all of our profiles. And before, because we wanted these desired keys, we had to use a CK operation, which used these 2 completion blocks. Again, new in Swift 5.5, the convenience API got a lot more powerful. So let's run through this real quick. We are returning a dictionary of CK record ID in an int. So this CK record ID represents the location ID. So it'll be Chipotle 5. And it's just how many people are checked into Chipotle, essentially. So I'm going to copy this dictionary because that's what we're going to return. Delete the completion handler. Make this async throws. And it returns that dictionary of CK record. Here is us building the predicate in the query. Well, I no longer need the CK operation. I'm going to comment out desired keys so I remember what they are. We'll keep this for now. I'm not sure if I need that. I believe I do need that. This operation, I'm not going to delete because I'm going to need this similar code. I'm just going to copy and paste. But remember, same code, right? Let match results, comma, and we're not using the cursor for this one, equals try await container dot public database dot records matching query. We've done this a bunch now, right? There's the query up there, except I want to add a parameter. Just like I added result limits last time, well, now I can add desired keys. And I want the array, remember this does take an array, ddg profile.k is, okay, that went off screen. Okay, now I can delete this because that's what I want. So like I said, before when we had to drop down to CK operation just to have desired keys, that is now built into the convenience API. And you can see you can add the parameters as you see fit because they do have default values. So we don't want to mess with result limits, but we do want to mess with desired keys. Now we can add that. Again, I'm going to go up and get our favorite line of code here, right? Again, this is straight from Apple source code. I didn't come up with this to be very clear, but again, now that I understand it and I've used it a lot, I like it. But here we are. Again, we're going to get a clean array of records, right? No nils. If there's an error, we're not throwing an error, we're just returning a nil, and the compact map is cleaning out those nils, digging into that result. Okay, I think I've explained that like 10 times now. But now we have our clean array of records, and now I want to build our dictionary from that array of records, which, remember, this old operation record fetch block returned a single record at a time, and we were handling that accordingly. Well, now we just replace this with a for loop. Go through our records. So for record in records, basically bring this up here, X, or Command X, I should say, delete that. And now, except I don't want to return here, remember, I just want to continue. And this line of code should never happen, right? This line of code is basically saying if our record doesn't have a is checked in, which that's the only thing we're pulling from. So this is basically just to unwrap the optional so I don't have to force unwrap everywhere. This should never happen, but in case it does, we're just going to continue on. We're not going to execute this code, but we probably are going to have a good location reference. So this is how I'm not going to explain this again. I explained this initially, same code, but essentially we're building this dictionary where we're going to have the key being the location ID. Again, this is going to be like Chipotle, Original Joe's. And then the value, we're going to increment, maybe Chipotle has 5 people, Original Joe's has 0, Grace's Deli has 7. That's how we're building this dictionary. And then we don't need any of this completion handler, or we don't need to, add the operation. That's all done. But at the end, I would need to return something, right? I need to return checked in profiles, right? That's what we called it. Yes, I need to return this dictionary at the end. So this function is done. Real quick review because it's very similar to what we've done. Market async, market throws us through the air. It has to return something. It's not an optional. It's returning our dictionary that we're building. Again, it has the location IDs and then how many people are there. Building our query, that's the same. We have our dictionary that starts off as an empty dictionary that we're going to build from the records that we get back. Here is us doing records matching the query. We did set desired keys, so all we're getting back is the is checked in reference. We're not getting back the first name, last name, avatar, because all we care about is the count. We don't care about the individual people in this case. Here is us reaching in to get our records. Explain that a bunch. Now that we have our array of records, we're going to iterate over those records and then build our dictionary from those records accordingly, and then we're going to return that dictionary. Cool, do a Command B, and then we're just probably going to error to go to the call site. Here we are, click on our error, go to the call site, and do what we've been doing before, right? We can do task, do, and then I look at the success case here. I need to set checked in profiles equal to checked in profiles. So same thing. So checked in profiles equals try await CloudKit manager dot shared dot get checked in profiles count. Make sure we're using the right one. And then if that fails, right, we're going to catch the error. So I'm going to copy that alert item down there. We'll do a catch and paste that there. So let's delete this, and then we're routing to the main thread. So let's make sure we're marked main actor here. Scrolling up to the top. Okay, we've already dealt with stuff in here, so we are already marked main actor. Good to go. So now let's run this to make sure our counts on our map annotations are showing up properly. Yep, there they are, 5. There are 5 people checked in there. Cool. So that is now working. So let's go back to our CloudKit manager. Scroll down here to, now we have batch save, save, fetch. I'm going to fix all these at the same time because these get like real simple. And then we'll go to the call sites because there's going to be a lot of call sites where we do these basic simple, save and fetch. That's going to be the tedious part, is updating all the call sites. But this part, you're going to see this code turns into real simple, nice looking code here. So batch save, we return an array of records, because if you remember when we batch save, we have saved records and delete, but we're only messing with the save side of things. So we are going to return an array of records, which is going to be our saved records. So I can delete the completion handler, mark it async, throws, and return an array of CK record. I don't need an operation. I am going to rewrite the operation to be let saved results, and again, another tuple. Like I said, when you're using async await, get used to using tuples. And this would be deleted results. Again, that's the tuple. I'm going to show you this in a second, but I want to write out the code first. Try await container.public database dot modify records. And you see the very first one, saving and deleting. So this is us saving records. And if you look down here, we pass in records to save, which is an array of records. And this is going off screen. I don't know. Sorry. And then pass in records to delete. And then it returns the tuple of saved results and deleted results. Sorry. I mean, you can probably see it better on your screen maybe, but that's what I want to do. So the saving records, I want to pass in what we passed in here, records. And then deleting records is just an empty, it's not optional, so I can't like delete it, you see? So I'm just going to pass in an empty array for deleting. But we're not using deleted results, so I can make that the underscore. Now maybe since it's closer if I tap modify records. Okay, here we go. But you can see the tuple, right, is saved results, which again, same thing, is an array of a dictionary of CK record ID and the result, and same thing with deleted results. So very similar to what we were dealing with before, where we got to dig in there and get it. So how do we dig in there and get it? Yep, it's our favorite line of code up here. Right, so okay, except it's a little different here. So I'm not saying, it's not let records, right? It would be let saved results equals, well, no, I'm going to say the saved records. That's better, right? Because it is an array of records. So this is now saved results, not match results, but we're doing the same thing, compact map, dig into the result type, get it, and then I can delete all of this stuff because we don't need that anymore. That's what we just did. So now I can return saved records, return saved record through command B, see if I'm getting errors anywhere. Nope, okay. Oh, I just don't need this operation anymore, right? We're not using CK operation. So you can see we're getting down to a couple lines of code because I can even make this 2 lines of code, right? Because instead of just creating this variable and then returning that variable, why don't I just return this? Return save results, and that is an array of CK record that we saved, which is what we're returning here. Now we just need to deal with the save and the fetch, and these ones, believe it or not, get even simpler than this. So same thing, what are we returning here? We're returning one CK record that we save. So, okay, delete the completion handler, right? We pass in a record and it returns a record. So async throws, and it returns a CK record. So to avoid confusion, the whole reason we have to do this compact map thing is because we're digging into an array of results. When we're not digging into an array, we don't even have to like mess with that stuff. We're just getting one record back. So what I can do here is just do return try await container dot public cloud database dot save, and you can see save record, and it returns a record, right? Throws. So the record I want to save is the record we pass in here. So record. And then what's going to happen, just to refresh your memory, if this is a successful save, it returns this record that we got back, right? See, it returns a CK record. If this fails, it's going to throw the error, which again, we'll handle at the call sites. So I can delete this whole thing, right? So saving a record is that simple. Do command B to make sure that error is wrong. Yep. Okay, now you can see we're using save and fetch and batch save at a lot of places. So all of these errors are where we need to update the call site. But again, I wanted to update these simple ones first here. So fetch is going to be very similar to this. As you can see, it returns one CK record. So let's delete the completion handler. So we pass in a record ID, async throws, and it returns a CK record, right? This is the record we're fetching. And then same thing, I just return try await container dot public cloud database dot record for, and if you look here, this takes in a record ID and returns a specified ID. By the way, so many of these new functions were added that how I like found all these was literally just by going through, reading the description. Is this what I want? Is this what I want? Is this what I want? Because they added so many new functions here and variations on the function in this new convenience API. Like this CloudKit, as you can see, that took us 3 videos, got a nice revamp for Swift 5.5 and iOS 15. So record 4, and it takes in a record ID. Well, luckily we passed in a record ID, called ID right there. So ID, and we can delete all this stuff here. This is now basically a one-liner. So cool. Command B to make sure we have no errors anywhere. Well, again, it's all at the call sites. So to recap that, look, batch save turns into this, save turns into that, fetch turns into that. So very nice, very easy to read and straightforward to understand what's going on. So now the tedious part is updating all the call sites where we use this. So I'm just going to go down this list over here and start updating it. And some of these call sites aren't so simple. So get checked in status, right? So here we are, we're fetching our profile record. So I'm going to start up here, do a task, and what is the success case, right? The success case is this right here. So I need a record from the success case, which is what we're fetching, right? So I want to say let record equal try await cloudkit manager.shared.fetch with ID, and that's profile record ID. That's what we're passing in up here. And again, I'm just looking at what we used in the old one here, right? And okay, just to double check, we're dispatching to the main queue. Let me see if this is marked main actor. It is already marked main actor. We've already dealt with this. Cool. See, that's what I'm saying. That's nice, right? So in the success case, right? So this do, consider it like the success case if you have more than one line here. So we want to do this if else statement in the success case. So I'll copy that and paste it after here, because this is only going to execute if this line is successful. Because remember, if this line fails, then we go into the catch block down here, which again is our failure case here. And you're going to see how this really shines in a little bit when we have nested network calls. But it looks pretty similar here. But again, the benefits are we're not dealing with the weak self dance. We don't have to manually dispatch to the main queue. That's all handled for us. And you'll see in nested network calls, it's really nice. So Command B, make sure my curly braces are good. And we'll test the app. We'll run it once we've done like all of these. So I'm just going to go down the list, and it's a lot of that here. So again, get checked in status. Pretty much the same thing here. Task, do. And again, what are we doing in the success? I need a record, right? Okay, so let record equal try await cloudkit manager.shared.fetch record with ID, and the ID is profile record ID. Again, just using the same thing here. And then in the success case, we're doing this again as well. So copy that, paste that there. What are we doing in the failure case? Breaking. Okay, so we're not showing an error in this case. So I will do the catch because we still have to do it. Remember, this forces us to handle the error. Even if we choose as a product to not show an error, we still have to do something in this catch block, which I'll just print unable to get checked in status, right? But we chose for product reasons not to show an error. So I can delete this and do a Command B, again, just to make sure I didn't mess up my curly braces anywhere. Okay, so this call site is good. Again, like I said, we're getting a record from here, and then this will only execute if this is successful. If it's unsuccessful, nothing's gonna happen. We're just gonna print that out. Okay, next one. Okay, this is a nested network call. Now here's where you're gonna see async await really shine. Like, look how nested and nasty this looks. And I remember writing this for the first time and be like, oh man, you're in this success case, and then you got success case and failure case here, and then you got the overall failure case. It's really confusing. Well, watch how clear this is gonna be. It's not necessarily gonna be like a lot less code, but it's gonna read top to bottom and make more sense, where this kind of like jumps in and out of these multiple switch statements, right? So, okay, let's get started on this. So we'll do it after the show loading view. Gotta remember to hide loading view here. So in this success case, what do I want? Cool, I want a record. Task, do, let record equal try await cloudkit manager.shared.fetch record with profile ID. And that's this profile ID up here. And again, I just use that. So if this is successful, right now we're in the success case. So I want to do this to the record, right? We're setting things to nil because we checked out. So we checked out successfully. Again, this line of code only executes if this is successful. If it's not successful, it goes into the catch case, which we're showing the same error. Like if you look in this failure, we're hiding the loading view, showing the error, hiding the loading view, showing the error. So I'm going to do this. We don't have to route to the main thread. It's going to be handled for us. Bam. And let's remember to hide loading view here. I'll do that after I write the code. So if getting the fetch record is successful, look, we're making another network call to save it. So rather than all this nested stuff, it's another just let saved record equal try await cloudkit manager.shared.save. And then we want to save this record, right? Record. And then now we can go to this, success case, and we want to do haptic manager and, is checked in equals false. So that's down here. And then if all that goes successful, I want to hide loading view. And I don't need this self dot. Remember, another benefit because we're not in a closure. So Command B to make sure that's all good. Oh yeah, I got to delete all this stuff now. So like, look how confusing and nested this code was, right? And in fact, if you want to like comment this out and leave it just for, a comparison, that might be interesting. But here's where async await really shines when you have the nested network calls, because again, it reads top to bottom, and this is called structured concurrency. What you saw before with that nested, like we're jumping in and out of switch statements, that is called unstructured concurrency, meaning like things are happening out of order from the way they're typed out. This is why async await makes things easier to understand. Actually, we're not even using this saved record, so I can make that. That's what that warning is telling me, right? Because it just reads top to bottom. Hey, try to get a record from this network call. If that fails, I know I'm going into the catch. If it succeeds, I know I'm continuing on, and I'm doing this stuff to the record, and part of continuing on is making another network call. If this fails, we're going into the catch. If it succeeds, we continue on. Again, it reads top to bottom. So much easier to understand and make sense of what's going on. This, to me, is the perfect like highlight of the power of async await. But okay, let's continue on with our call sites here. Okay, we're creating a profile here. So this is where we're batch saving. I remember we had to save the user record and the profile record. I remember that now. So let's do some batch saving here. So what is the success case, right? We get an array of records back. So I will say let record. Whoop, I need to do my task, async, all that stuff. Task do. Now we say let records, because that's the array of records we get back, equal try await CloudKit manager.shared.batch save, and the records we pass in are right. We kind of manually created this array right here, so I'm just going to copy and paste that. Right, we didn't have an array created. We just manually created an array with these two records. Okay, let me double check to make sure we're main actor. Scroll up to the top. And we are not main actor on our profile view model. So cool. At main actor, it's going to handle that. Scroll back down to where we were. Now I got to remember to hide the loading view here. But remember, this is just like the success case. So in the success case, we're doing, we're iterating through the records and setting some stuff here, and then we're showing a successful alert. So again, I'm just going to copy that. We're not changing anything here. And remember, this code only runs if this line is successful. If this line is not successful, we go into the catch case, which would be the failure case, which again is showing an alert. And I got to remember, I need to hide the loading view, right? So it's hide, and this is the one downside to async await is you got to call hide loading view in both places. But that now replaces this. And like I said, we're going to test all this functionality once we get all this written. So Command B. All right, we got a couple left. Going down the list here. Okay, fetch record. So here, I want to task do. Again, I look at the success case. Cool, this returns a record. That's what I need. So let record equal try await CloudKit manager.shared.fetch record. What's the record ID? Okay, yep, profile record ID. Cool, that's what we need. And then I'm looking, am I on the main thread? Yes, I am in the profile view model. So I know I just marked that main actor a little bit ago. Got that. So now the success case, now that I have a record, is what we're doing here. So I'm going to copy that into the success case. And I got to remember to hide the loading view. So we will hide loading view there. Like I said, it's not so much that you're trying to like save lines of code. It's just that it makes more sense and it abstracts away a lot of the errors that you normally make, like routing things to the main thread or handling all the exits on the completion handlers and dealing with the weak self and all that stuff. It just handles all that for you. So Command B, let's keep it moving. And you'll notice I'm going a lot quicker because we've done this many, many times. So again, task, do. What do I need here in the success case? Nothing. So I can just do let underscore equal try await CloudKit manager.shared.save record. And we're saving the profile record. That's what we've kind of built up here. If that is successful, we're showing the success alert for creating the profile. So copy, paste. If it's not successful, we show profile failure. Again, I got to remember to hide loading view. Hide loading view. If there's a bug when we test this, it's going to be I forgot to show or hide the loading view. This is all done. Again, I'm in my profile view model, so I know I'm marked main actor. Do Command B to get rid of some errors. Okay, I believe this might be the last one. I know, it's been a journey. Click on this here. Okay. Update check-in status. Okay, we got another nested one here. So another place to shine. All right, so I want the task and then the do and then try. Well, let me look at what's the success, right? Success case, I get a record here, right? So I need let record equal CloudKit manager.shared.fetch record with profile record ID. Right, again, I'm just looking at this to what I use it. Cool. So if this succeeds, I want to do the success case, which is this switch statement here. So copy, oops, I forgot try await. Forgot to do try await. And then if it's successful, do the switch statement. And then if you look here, I'm doing a save network call as well. So we'll do that down here as well. So let saved record. I don't want to call it record because that would be confusing, right? Equal try await CloudKit manager.shared.save. And the record I want to save is the record that we got back from the initial network call. So just type record here. And then now in the success case of the save, right? What do I want to do? I want to play this success sound, create a profile, update, do all this stuff, right? So I'm going to copy this and then paste this here. But be careful. let me go back to where I was, right? You see in this success case, I'm also returning something called record. I named it the same thing here. So I want to name this, I'm not named it, I'm sorry, I already named it save record, but I want to make sure I'm using saved record instead of record right here. And that's all good there. So now I can delete this. Hopefully I get the nested curly braces right. Okay, cool. We are done. No more errors. Let's run the app and test it to make sure everything is working. Okay, I'm going to go to my locations, location list. I'm going to check in. See, I told you, I knew I was going to mess up hiding the loading spinner. So we'll check out. Okay, cool. So on check in and check out. I believe that's what I just did. Yeah, that's literally what I just wrote. So here, oh, I didn't even handle a catch case. All kinds of bugs here. So here I want to hide loading view, and then I want to do the catch to where I do alert item equals alert context dot unable to check in or out. Check in or out. Okay, let's run this again and try it. Okay, cool. Go to locations. I am checked into Chipotle. Check out. That works. Check in. That works. Okay, let's go to my profile. Cool. It retrieved my profile. I've checked out. That works. Let me update my profile. Update. Update profile. Cool. Profile update failed. We were unable to update it this time. Might have to go back and look at update. Let's try it one more time. Update. Update failed. Okay. We're going to go back and see what we messed up in our update profile function. Okay. Sorry for a herky-jerky cut. I did a bunch of debugging trying to solve this problem, and I forgot to record the audio. Luckily, there was nothing to debug. It was just a simulator issue, right? So to recap, I looked into this save function, right? I command clicked into the save. What was I doing there? Okay, this is just the basic save. I made sure I was using the right save, which I was. And then I went back to the profile view model to make sure like I was, saving the right record, the profile ID. Everything looked good. I checked my source code. I was like, well, why isn't this working? So I decided to just run it again, and maybe the simulator was acting up, because I had heard on Twitter that the initial Xcode release, the simulator was all messed up and Xcode 13 was very buggy. So I was like, all right, let me just run it again. And it worked great. So you're going to see like the update's already working. So sorry you didn't get to see that whole thing. I forgot to hit start on my audio. What are you going to do? But long story short, the simulator messed up. Our code was fine. So if I go to profile, you can see this is my update. This is my second update. That was me testing it in silence while you couldn't hear it. But hey, let's do this. Oh, too many characters. Okay, let me just delete these updates just to prove to you that it is still working. Watch, famous last words. My simulator won't work. Update profile. Profile updated success. Sweet, cool. And then I stopped running it, ran it again just to make sure that update persisted. And if I go to my profile, there you go. I deleted all that stuff. Long story short, simulator messed up. All my debugging didn't record the audio, but hey, there you go. The code works fine as is. But if I go to my CloudKit manager, that is, us refactoring every single CloudKit network call. We basically revamped our entire networking layer. This was a big project, so I'm glad you stuck with it. We got a lot of practice. If you have any questions, please ask in the comments, ask in the Slack channel. This is a big, big topic. So I understand if you were a little confused. Hopefully all the repetition made it click after a while. But again, ask questions as always. Thanks for sticking with this long journey of the CloudKit update. Very long videos. Let's move on to the next one, which is pretty easy. In this video, we're going to implement pull to refresh on our location list screen. And then we're also going to make our profile view a little more user-friendly when it comes to navigating each of our text fields and dismissing the keyboard. Okay, first up is the pull to refresh, which is relatively easy now that all of our network calls are using async await, because pull to refresh, the way we're going to do it, relies on async await. So if we didn't have our network calls like that, we would have had issues. But now that we've done all that, this will be easy. So to get pull to refresh, we need a modifier called .refreshable. And you see the code it takes in. We just want to pass in view model.get checked in profiles. Because when we pull down, we want to update who's checked in where, right? That's the use case. You see the screen here. You can imagine if you're at WWDC, people are constantly checking in and out if this has thousands of users. So you want to pull to refresh to get the updated list of like who's checked in where. So let me clean up this line real quick, and I'll do Command B and we're going to get errors because I haven't set it up fully. It's not that easy. Well, we didn't get any errors, but this isn't going to work. You'll see if you run this and try to pull to refresh, it's not going to keep calling the network call. Because again, we got to use the async await. The get checked in profiles dictionary function has to be marked async. So if I go to our view model, here's the get checked in profile dictionary. We have to mark it async. And because we marked it async, we no longer have to do task because that puts this whole thing in an async context. There's a couple different ways you can like do this. Like sometimes you can use task, sometimes you can use async. When you use async on the function, you have to call await before it. You'll see we have to do that. So let me get rid of the task here just to clean this up. Control I to do my curly braces. And then, okay, back to the location list view. Now, like I'll do a command B and I'll get yelled at, right? Expression is async, but is not marked with await, right? So the simple fix there, because we marked the function async, we need to do await and then await here. So now let's actually make sure we're doing this. So back to our location view model or list view model. We want to, after this network call is a success, remember this line will only execute if this try is a success. I don't know what that was doing. So we'll just do called, just to make sure I know that this network call has successfully been called, right? Because we only have 5 dummy users. Nothing is going to update. We're not going to be able to tell just by looking at the app. So we'll run it. So keep an eye down here in the lower left. I'll go to my locations list. Okay, see, we got called once. Whoops, called right there. Now pull to refresh, watch. So when I pull to refresh, I'm gonna get the little spinner for free. There you go, see, called again. Do it again, called. I'll move this up so we can see all the called. But this just proves that the network call is happening successfully. Called. Okay, so that is pull to refresh implemented. Pretty easy when we already handled all of our like async await stuff, right? As you can see back in the location list, mark the function async and then put await in front of it. Good to go. Okay, so that is pull to refresh. Pretty simple. Now let's talk about our profile view here and navigating through. I'll actually run the app so you can see. We want to improve the navigation through our form here on our profile, right? Because right now I tap in Sean. Well, let me do Command K to get my keyboard to show up. The keyboard shows up. I have to like actually go tap into the next one. I have to go tap into the next one. I gotta go tap. Wouldn't it be nice if I type Sean and then I hit next and I go to the last name one and then I type Alan and I hit next and I go to creator view? Just a little better UX when navigating this form. Because right now when I hit return, the keyboard disappears. I gotta go to Alan, hit return, keyboard disappears. We want that to hit next and just navigate through. And then what we're also gonna do is add a toolbar that has a dismiss keyboard button in there, right on there, so we can get rid of this button in the upper right as well. Okay, so again, just improving the UX of our profile screen. But this introduces a new property wrapper called focus state. And this was new in iOS 15. Whoops, it's at focus state. My apologies. At focus state, private var, we'll say focused text field. And now this is of type, you might think text field, but no, we're actually gonna make an enum so we can determine which one this is. So I'll do enum, we'll call this profile text field, and that is gonna be of case first name, last name, company name, and bio. So now this is of type profile text field, and you'll see how we use this right now. But this focus state basically determines, which text field or text input is focused. I'm sorry, I need this to be optional because when this is nil, the keyboard will dismiss. You'll see that come into play at the end. So these 3 text fields are what we want to add this to, and then also our bio text field or text editor down here. So maybe text field isn't like the proper name for this since we have a text editor in there. I'm not going to split hairs here. Okay, so text field. First thing we want to do is say when you're focused, like what are you, right? So we want to determine the focus here. So focused equals, so this is a binding to the focus state, which is our focus text field up here. So $focus text field equals dot first name. So basically when this is focused, we are first name. You'll see how this comes into play when we want to manually shift focus, okay? I'm actually going to put some spaces in between our text fields to make this obvious here. So basically the same line of code. So I'm going to copy and paste. Oh, actually I forgot about our profile name style. Let's put these modifiers all on the line here. So do this here and that one as well. So focus text field now equals last name for this one, and then company name for this one. And down here on our bio text editor, we want it to equal .bio. Okay, so that is just saying like when you're focused, like we're defining what this profile text field is. Because when we do on submit, so .on submit, we want to do focus text field equals the next text field we want to go to. So if we're in first name, we want it to be last name when they hit the submit button. And the submit button is that button in the lower right, the return button. We're actually going to change the name of that accordingly. You'll see that in a second. But I'm kind of doing these one at a time. So when we hit submit on the first name, we want to go to last name. When we hit on submit on the last name, we want to go to company name. Again, this is just us navigating down the form. And then when we're on company name, the next one we want to go to is bio, right? So that'll just navigate through. And then when we're on bio, You can't really do an on submit on bio. Where is bio? Right here. Because the bio has a return button. I'll show you that next time we run it. And because it's a text editor, right, and you can hit return to like build paragraphs and stuff, it's not the same kind of button. So we don't have to do anything with that. So back up to our other text fields. Now we want to name our submit button. So we'll do submit label. And now this is what the name of it's going to be. Right now it was returned by default. Well, if I do dot, okay, give me the autocomplete. Come on, there we go. Dot return, dot continue. Like I can't make this say anything, but you've seen these keyboard names, right? Go, join, search. So you want to do whatever is like what you need. So we want it to say next, right? We want it to say next, next. So basically all our text fields up here are going to say next, next, next. And then our bio label, or not label, our bio text editor is going to say, well, no, it's not going to say anything because it's return. So what we're going to do there, and I say it's return because remember, you can return. I'll show you when we run it. Okay, so let's test this before we put our dismiss toolbar on the keyboard. So now you can see this in action and what we're doing. Okay, go to profile. Okay, so I'm in Sean, right? And then now when I type Sean, see in the lower right, it's now called next. When I tap next, I go right into the last name. You see our button move. We're going to fix that. Now I hit next. I go right into creator view. I could be typing stuff. I hit next. Now I'm in my text editor, right? Just improving the user experience of navigating through our profile. But now I said this was return because we're in a text editor. Look, I can like hit return a bunch of times, right? And then delete to go back up. So this button is not the typical text field button. That's why we couldn't do anything. But when they get to this point, we want them to be able to dismiss the keyboard. We're going to add this toolbar here. So down here at the bottom of the V stack, our overall V stack, I want to add this toolbar. That way everything that has a keyboard has this in it. So I'm going to do some code folding so I can see it. And on this V stack, I want to do toolbar with content. And then I actually don't need the content, right? I can just open and close the curly braces. So I want to do toolbar item group. And this is the new thing here. So this toolbar item group has a placement parameter. And if I do dot, come on, give me the autocomplete. You can see everywhere I can place it. Obviously keyboard is what we want, but bottom bar, I mean, tons of different places like you can like potentially place it. We want it to be on our keyboard. And then the content of it is a button with an action of, well, the title key is dismiss. And then the action is, we'll actually just do the open and close curly brace, is to say focus text field equals nil. Remember I said when we set this focus state to nil, it's going to dismiss the keyboard. So when anybody taps this dismiss button, we're setting that to nil and that dismisses the keyboard. Let me uncode fold here. So because I put that on the overall VStack, every keyboard inside is going to have it. So now when we run it, you're going to see this in action as well. Okay, back to our profile here. Okay, so when I click in Sean, you see we have the dismiss button. Now our update profile button is cramping everything. We're going to fix that update profile button. Actually, let's do it right now before I do everything so I can test it all at the same time. So what I can do down here in all of our modifiers, well, first of all, I want to delete this toolbar, right, that has our dismiss keyboard and dismiss keyboard, chevron, whatever, right? So delete that. And also let me go to this function, right? Define this or jump to definition. We no longer need this. This handles it for us. Bye, see ya. Deleting code is fun. And then delete this toolbar. But I'm going to add another modifier. So delete that, dot ignores safe area with some edges, and the edges, or the safe area regions, I'm sorry, is dot keyboard, and then edges, get rid of that. So basically I'm saying my whole view, I want to basically ignore the safe area of the keyboard, so when I run it, you'll see my button won't slide up with the keyboard, which is what we want, it'll hide it, and you'll see the behavior here. So go to profile, cool, click in Sean, now you see the button's not sliding up, and if we do want to update, we can dismiss right there. So tap in Sean, right, so you can imagine, I type Sean, I hit next, I go to Alan, I hit enter creator view, hit next, enter my bio. Instead of return, I dismiss, good to go, hit update profile, and we're good. So again, just small things to improve the user experience of navigating through our form. We all know forms can be annoying to fill out, so the easier you can make it on the user, the better. And that wraps up the What's New in iOS 15 section. For now, who knows, maybe there'll be another video or two in the future as things pop up, but the initial What's New in iOS 15 is done with this. And again, the bulk of the work was completely revamping our networking layer with the new CloudKit APIs and async away. That was a big project as you just went through. So hope you enjoyed it, and I guess we'll see you in iOS 16.
The very first thing you'll notice about Xcode 14 is that it went on a bit of a diet. By default, it doesn't include the watchOS and tvOS stuff. You just get iOS and macOS SDK. Now, of course, you can check the boxes and install those. But if we're being truthful here, just between me and you, most developers aren't working with the watch or the tvOS, so why include that in everyone's Xcode? So that's how we got that 30% savings and a much lighter download for Xcode. The first new feature of Xcode 14 I want to show you is a very nice quality of life improvement. As you can see on my screen, I have a crap ton of icons. Now what we can do, instead of having to create all these different sizes in like a design tool and bring them in, over here on the right, you can see you have iOS all sizes, still says Xcode 13 because I guess there's maybe a slightly different version for Xcode 14. But if you go to single size, you'll notice as long as you have the 1024 point icon, Xcode will automatically scale it down to all those other ones that you saw before. So instead of having all those icons, now you just need this 1024.1 and you're good to go. Quick note that, like I said, Xcode just scales it down. So some apps will use, different versions of their icon for the super small, like 32 by 32 version, just to make it more visual. So if your app icon is like that, you might not benefit from this, but I would argue most people's app icons can just be scaled down. So again, huge quality of life improvement. Moving on to SwiftUI previews. First of all, they are live by default. You don't have to hit like a play button or a run button, so they will update live. That is by default. But the big thing, again, huge quality of life, is the variants button that you see down here, this little grid looking thing. So if you click on it, you can click color scheme variants, and now look at my preview. Right, you get the light and dark mode side by side, just like that. And you can click on one of them to make it bigger. There's a little back button up here to go back. Click the light one if you want to really dive in. Cool, so I can see light and dark mode. Orientation variants. Nice, I can see portrait, landscape left. Well, if I make it bigger here, or I can zoom out of my preview. Either way, cool, I can see landscape right. Again, orientations, just like that. Now the really cool one, dynamic type variants. You're gonna see, we're gonna get a bunch. So you can see how your view will look with all the different dynamic type settings, just like this. Now, of course, before, you could add modifiers to your previews to show the different variants and have a bunch of different previews up there. This is just so much nicer. In the click of a button, you can see all the variants and see what kind of work you have to do for these super duper large sizes. Now for some code editor improvements here. So I'll make my preview smaller now because that's not important. The first quick and easy thing I want to show you, as you can see, we're in a settings view. I'll make my code a little bigger so you can see it. By the way, I know there's many improvements I can make to this settings screen in the code. That's not what this video is about. So keep your comments to yourself. I know there's issues. Anyway, we're in the settings view, but as you can see, we get the sticky headers. So bam, settings view stuck to the top. And here's where it's good because, right, my var body sum view, there's a lot of stuff going on in it. So you can see, I know that now I'm in var body sum view. As I'm scrolling down, I'm still in var body sum view because there's a lot going on, still going. And then now we see we have a sign out of Google function here. So now that pins to the top. So that is sticky headers, a nice way to know where you're at in your file. Another nice thing, if you do Command-Shift-L to open up your library, and over here on the right, you see SF symbols, this little star here. SF symbols are built into your library now. I don't know about you, I always would have to go Command Space, SF symbols, open up the app like you see here, scroll through, find them. It's just a lot of extra steps. Now again, Command-Shift-L, pull up your library, hit the little star, and they're searchable too, so I can do sun. Right, I can see all the different sun and stuff like that. So nice to be built right into the library. Again, Command-Shift-L, hit the little star, and you get all your SF symbols. And another little thing, and I don't want to discredit the little things, right? Because all these little, again, quality of life, I feel like I've said quality of life so much in this video, but all those little quality of life improvements really add up to a better experience. And another one here is in our simulators, right? You click on iPhone 14 Pro, you've had all these simulators, and if you have the watchOS and tvOS, you got even more. So this is nice. We have this recent section up here. So if you're bouncing between, like in this case, hey, I was testing the iPhone 8 and then the iPhone 14 Pro, your recent simulators are going to be right up there, which is, again, a nice improvement. And we can now see test flight feedback right in Xcode. So if I go to Windows, Organizer. Now this is over here, well, feedback, I already have it highlighted. Spoilers, we used to be able to see crashes, all this stuff. Now I can go to feedback and I can see, I'll make this bigger here, all my test flight feedback right in here in Xcode. And you see if I click on something over here on the right, I can email Jason Mitchell. But yeah, you can see all of your test flight feedback right from here with screenshots, email the user. Normally you'd have to go to App Store Connect and in test flight and dig for that. Now it's all right here. You also have the hangs, that is new. Now I don't have any hangs here. Well, hang logs are not available for macOS, so I'm on the macOS version. If I go to Creator View, iOS, I don't think there's any hang log detected. I'm sure Creator View does have hangs, but here's a screenshot from the WWDC video of what it would look like with hangs that you can diagnose. Again, this is all new in the organizer right here in Xcode. Okay, we'll close that and back to the code here. We're going to talk about some autocomplete stuff here. So I made some room, as you can see. So now we get a lot of boilerplate code done for us, like member-wise initializers or codable conformance. So let's say we have a video object. This is just a real quick dummy object. Var title, which is a string. Var date, which is of type date. Var is live stream, which is a Boolean. Var note, which is a string. Now with these basic structs, typically you get the memberwise initializer for free, but sometimes you need to type it out. So you would do init, and then, anyone that's been developing iOS for a while has typed this out thousands of times manually. Now we get that for free. Same thing with like codable conformance. So we'll conform video to codable, and then you just start typing decoder right here, and you see you get the little curly braces with the dot, dot, dot. Now you get all this stuff in there. And then same thing with type encoder. Bam. And then now you also, when you do both of them, you get the coding keys. So like I said, there's just a lot of boilerplate stuff that, again, if you've been coding for a while, you've typed this out manually plenty of time. The last thing I want to talk about in this section is the auto completion of parameters. Let me get rid of all this codable stuff just to declutter the screen and not be so confusing. So, a title for video is cool, a date for video, a live stream, most of it's not going to be a live stream, so we can set a default value to false. And then a note, most of them aren't going to have notes, so we'll have a default value of a string. So now let's say we had a function here, again, dummy code here, func create, and in here we're going to create a video. So let video equal, and then we'll initialize a video here. Now you can see down here in this one, is live stream and note is kind of grayed out and italicized. So if I just hit return, because those have default values, bam, I just get title and date. But if I go back here, what if I did want those values? There's a couple ways to do this. So video, and then if I hold option, you'll see they light up and I'll get them all. So if I hold option, hit it, get them all. Cool. Now, another way to do this real quick, and this is really going to come in handy in SwiftUI, which I'll show you in a second. But if you do video, cool, is live stream and note are optional. But if I start typing is live stream, you see that will light up. And if I start typing note, that will light up as well. So now I'll get them all. Now, that may seem like a contrived example when you're initializing those, but let me get rid of all this and go back to SwiftUI. And this is where this is going to be such a lifesaver. So back up here onto this list here for the settings view. I'm going to code fold it so you don't get distracted by all the messiness going on in there. So look, on this list, right, a common thing we do in SwiftUI is .frame. Of course, if you're dealing with like min width, max width, there's a whole bunch of them, but this is where it's nice where you can type it like I said. So if I did frame, again, you could hold option to get all of them. Most likely you're not going to want all of them. But if you just start typing, min, max, you see min width and max width lit up. I can hit return, min width, max width. I know if you've been dealing with SwiftUI for a while, you've had to type that out manually because you didn't want all those parameters. So that is nice. And then an even quicker one, right? So say I just want to have the width of a frame. So frame, I don't want width and height. So just start typing width, bam, frame width, and you got your frame. So like I said, SwiftUI modifiers with a ton of optional parameters. This is very common in SwiftUI. This typing out which parameters you want, you don't have to type it all out. You just have to type a letter of it. So you see, I just typed a W and then maybe another W. So now I'm getting how it's going through. The third W. So I got min width, ideal width, max width. So there's different letter combinations you can type to get what you want. You'll have to experiment with that, trial and error with that. But that is going to be such a time saver for SwiftUI. And then the last thing I want to show you is the build timeline. So you can diagnose, why is my build taking so long? You can really check it out in a visual manner. So before I do that, I'm going to do a Command-Shift-K. Might even just be Command-K, I don't know, whatever. Clean my build folder, product, perform action, build with timing summary. So you click that, it'll build. Over here on the right, we'll click this to see our latest build. So you see 917 build is currently working. Once that is done building, I will show you the timeline summary. Okay, so the build at 9:17 a.m. is done. We click on it. I'm gonna collapse all this stuff real quick just so you can get the summary here. So this is like the build, right? Building all the targets, building all the packages and stuff like that. Minimizing these so you can help or see it. Okay, so that's like the overall summary. Now, I don't see my build timeline right now. It may show up by default for you, but if you right click, show in timeline. Okay, put this on the right. Depending on your monitor setup, maybe you want it below, maybe you want it on the right. I guess this is big enough I can have it on the right. When I was testing this on my laptop, I just had to put it below. But you can see the timeline, and it is in milliseconds right now. If you hold option and kind of scroll on your mouse wheel, you can kind of zoom in and zoom out as I'm doing it here. So instead of milliseconds here, let's do, by the second, right? Or you can keep zooming in maybe every 5 seconds, right? That'll really put up the summary of your build. But you can look and see like what is taking so long to build, or, if something is egregious, something is really out of whack. Like sometimes your asset catalog can be like super duper long. But anyway, you can see the build of your timeline to, again, diagnose any issues you have and optimize your build times. Those are the highlights of Xcode 14 that I thought you would use, on a day-to-day basis. Of course, there are tons more changes. I'll link to the release notes in the description. Check those out if you want. We'll see you in the next video. In this video, we're going to run the app for the very first time on iOS 16, fix any issues if they arise. We're going to implement some new Swift 5.7 stuff, and then we're going to talk about maybe my favorite update to iOS 16 in SwiftUI and dot gradient. Okay, first things first, let's make sure you're on a good simulator. Let's go to iPhone 14 Pro. Any simulator in Xcode 14 will be on iOS 16, and hopefully you're on Xcode 14 if you're doing the iOS 16 section. But anyway, let's run this, and essentially what I do every new iOS is run the app on the new version and just play with it, try to break it, try all the features. We're gonna do an accelerated version of that because in real life, you should really go through it with a fine-tooth comb, press every button, do every little thing, try to break it. Luckily, we have a pretty simple app, but that's what I'm simulating right here. So this is a fresh install on the iPhone 14 Pro, because it's a new phone. So that's why we saw our onboarding screen, so that's working nicely. The same transparent bug on our tab bar is there. That was there in iOS 15. If you tap locations and go back to map, I don't know. I believe that's just a SwiftUI bug or a simulator bug. I don't think that has anything to do with our code. Let's test our location. So hit that, get location, okay. Cool, that took us to Cupertino, Apple headquarters. If you hold Option, let's zoom out and go back to San Jose, where all of our stuff is here. Now zoom in. Okay, so our map is working good. Good little test of that. Everything's fine. Oh boy, zoomed in super tight. Super tight on Chipotle, I think. No, zoom out. Okay, there it is. There's Chipotle. Okay, so map's working good. Click on Chipotle. Cool, that brings that up. Let's test some things, test the map. Allow once. You see I tested this before to make sure. Cool, map is working. Back to Dub Grub. Same thing with the internet and the website. Should take you to Chipotle. Go back to Dub Grub. That is working. Let's test a profile. Cool. Again, I'm going through this fast because I'm just kind of simulating this. You just want to make sure you can do all your features. Cool. Sean checked in. Let's check out Sean's profile. Nice. Dismiss. Go to location list. Cool. Peggy Sue's. Empty state's looking good. Go to profile. It did load in my profile. Let's change my profile picture. That's just a weird crop on these default photos. Let's go to the red ones. Choose a new profile. Hit update profile. Profile updated success. Sweet. Cool. Great. And by the way, this is just the keyboard. If I do Command-Shift-K, that pops up the keyboard. That's all you're seeing there. Anyway, looking good on iOS 16. After I run through the app to make sure it's good, then I shift my focus to the code. And the first thing I look for are any warnings. So I click on the little yellow arrow. Look, okay, the purple ones, this publish changes within view. If you Google this, you'll see a lot of people running into this, at least on Xcode 14.0, which is what I'm on. Rumors are in Xcode 14.1, this is fixed and not an issue. So I'm going with this just being an Xcode bug. However, if you're on 14.1, 14.2 or later, and this is still showing up, let me know. I'll do a quick update video to fix it. But the next warning is the main actor isolated instance method, location manager, cannot be used to satisfy a non-isolated protocol requirement. So the protocol requirement is CL location manager delegate. And that's what these two methods are. They're the closure-based delegates used on location manager. To sum this up, this warning has to do with the Swift concurrency update we did in iOS 15, where we adopted async await, right, for get locations, get checked in counts. And then what we did was we marked the entire class main actor. Well, when you mark the entire class that, it's like an umbrella. It essentially marks everything in here as main actor and makes it isolated, to this main actor. Well, as you can see, location manager delegates don't play well with main actor. It's a simple fix. Instead of just doing the blanket main actor, we can be more specific. Instead of having everything as main actor, let's just tag main actor on the ones that need it. And that is our async await functions, right? Because we're making a network call to CloudKit Manager to get locations. Same thing, making a network call to CloudKit Manager to get checked in profiles. So these ones need to be marked at main actor, and then so does this create location detail view because the location detail view model is marked main actor. So at main actor. So again, to sum that up, we marked the whole class main actor, which was too general, right? Because location manager delegates didn't play nice with that. So we just got more specific and marked the specific functions that needed to be on main actor. Now let's talk about a Swift 5.7 update to iflet and guardlet that is a very welcome change. I'll kind of use this as a scratch pad here. You've seen this code all over, right? If let image equals image, that kind of boilerplate, or image equals image. Well, in Swift 5.7, you no longer need this boilerplate when the names are the same. You can just do if let image. Small, simple syntax thing, but anything to make things cleaner, nicer, easy to read, I'm all for. So what we're gonna do is go to our search in the upper left. Let's search for iflet, and then we'll search for guardlet next. So the iflets are gonna be an example of when not to do this. So you see if let profile reference equal record user profile, like there's substance on the right side of the equal sign. When you do this change is when it's, if let profile reference equal profile reference. So we're gonna go through and fix all those. All of our if lets, by the way, I'm just going down the left-hand side of the search, all have substance on the right side of the equal sign. So none of our if lets are actually gonna apply to this new boilerplate. But I wanna simulate going through and checking all of this, right? If let CloudKit Manager, nope, there's substance. Down the left, there's substance. Okay, let's go to our guardlets. And I know I'm going through this quickly because it is a bit tedious. And if you're thinking, wow, if I have a huge project, I gotta go one by one. No, I'll link to a blog post that shows you how you can do a find and replace for all this if let guardlet stuff. However, a find and replace, if you have a huge project and you're touching 100 different files, that just makes me nervous. Just for unforeseen bugs could pop up. I don't know, maybe you trust find and replace more than I do, but I would prefer to go through them manually, like where reasonable. And you'll see this is gonna take me like 2 minutes to do. So if you have a medium to small size project, I recommend taking the time to go through it tediously, one by one, so you can see every instance of where it's at to make sure you're getting the right fix in. I think that'll save you time in the long run, even though it might take you like an hour one day. But anyway, we're going through all the guardlets on the left here. So guardlet location reference equals that. Nope, that has substance on the equal sign. Cursor equals cursor. Here's the first instance of it, right? Guardlet cursor equals cursor. Nope, here we go, just guardlet cursor. Okay, continue down the left. I'm gonna go through this quick. Guardlet location reference has substance. Guardlet cursor equals cursor. Nope, just guardlet cursor. Same thing, location reference is record DDG profile is checked in. Nope. Same thing, there's substance. Guardlet, there's substance on the right of the JPEG data. Here's an interesting twist. So guardlet asset equals square asset. Now, these are not the same name. So that find and replace wouldn't find this instance of it because we named them differently. What this is doing actually is it is looking for anything optional named square asset. So if I do guardlet square asset, and this is why I'm picking square asset and not asset, because it's saying, hey, is there anything in this file that has square asset as an optional? And if you remember on line 24, our CK asset called square asset is optional. It's implicitly unwrapped, but it's still optional. So that's why I chose square asset instead of guardlet asset. So now down here, asset needs to be called square asset because that's the new name. Same concept down here with banner asset. Just call that guardlet banner asset and rename that banner asset. Okay, moving on. Guardlet avatar equals avatar. Cool. There's an instance of where we did name it the same, so we can just delete that. And then there's substance on the right side. Substance on the right side. And you can see I'm going through this quick because it'll highlight it yellow and I can just immediately look to the right of the equal sign. Substance on the right side of the equal sign. Substance. We only got a couple left. I know this is tedious. I think there's only one left that we change here. Yep. Guardlet user record. There's substance. There's substance. And then this is the last one. Here's an instance where we named it differently. So similar to what we did before. So we're going to call this existing profile record. Because again, just to show you up here at the top, existing profile record is a CK record. And like I said, it's just going to look for an optional name this. That's how it's matching that. So back here, so guardlet existing profile record. Cool. So now we need to rename all these profile records. So I'm going to copy this. If you hold here, hold option, you get the vertical selection, paste it there, and then there's another instance here on line 179 that we will paste in there. You could have done edit all in scope. I don't know. I find that to be quicker. And back to our search, there's one more instance of it, but it has substance on the right. So like I said, I know that was tedious. I went through it kind of quick, so you don't want to sit there and watch me do that. Use the find and replace if you like. If I have a medium size to small project, I'm probably going to go through it one by one manually. But anyway, that is the new guardlet if-let syntax in Swift 5.7. Let's wrap this up with my favorite feature, and that is the gradient in Swift UI in iOS 16. So let's go to our location map view, show you what I'm going to do here. If I run the app, you're going to see our map balloons are just this flat green color, right? This brand primary that we've been using. We're going to add a subtle gradient to this. And we're going to do this in more videos in the future where we do it to buttons and stuff. But let me show you this. So in our map location view, command click on DDG annotation, jump to definition. Cool, here's our map balloon. Sometimes you can just do dot gradient, but here, because it's just expecting a color, it doesn't quite work. So I'm going to delete that, and we're going to comment out foreground color and just give our shape a dot fill with a color dot brand primary dot gradient. So that's the modifier, just dot gradient. And gradient is only available on iOS 16 or newer. I forgot to do that. So if we go to our project here, project Dub Grub, minimum deployment target, iOS 16, down to our target, iOS 16. Now you may be thinking, well, I got to support iOS 15. I can't just support iOS 16 and beyond. I hear you. The reason I'm going to do a minimum of iOS 16 is because this section is all about showing you all the brand new iOS 16 stuff. And if I want to be backwards compatible with iOS 15, I have to add a conditional like this, right? This hashtag available iOS 16, do the new stuff, iOS 15, do the old stuff. And I try to make my videos as clear and concise and as focused as possible. So I don't want you to have to watch me write everything twice in this conditional. And I want to touch on that, like writing everything twice. If you're writing things twice, that makes your code base a lot more cluttered. There's these huge conditionals everywhere. Writing things twice is twice the opportunity for bugs. There's pros and cons. And the point I want to make is make the decision that is best for your customers, your code base, your product. For example, if adopting a new iOS 16 feature like dot gradient makes your product that much better, by all means, do the conditional, write it twice. But just think a little bit. Don't automatically adopt everything because you might regret that. Weigh the benefits and the cost before you do some backwards compatibility. Anyway, I'm going iOS 16 minimum. So this should get rid of this. So like I said, you would see like hashtag available iOS 16, do this line, else do this line. So in this situation, not a big deal. It's one line of code, but it's probably one of the easier ones. Okay, now when I run it, you're gonna see the subtle gradient on the map balloons. You may not even notice it because that big circle image kind of covers up a lot of the gradient. Again, super subtle. You'll see it better on some of the buttons that we're gonna do later. iOS 16 introduces a fundamental change in SwiftUI navigation. And that is the good old navigation view that is used everywhere in code bases is now deprecated in favor of navigation stack, which is the typical master detail navigation that you see, where you tap a button, a view slides in from the right on top of the stack, and you can go back, etc. And navigation split view, which is the 2 and 3 column split views that you're familiar with. Why did they revamp navigation view? Well, it's the difference between view-based navigation and data-based navigation. So this new API is a data-driven navigation API. Let's implement it in the code so you can see it in action, and then I'll explain what that means a little further and the benefits of it. So here I am in the location list view. So you can see we got our good old navigation view. So if we delete navigation view and go to call it a navigation stack, next we need to change our navigation link. Because you see the old navigation link has a destination where you pass in a view. And in this case, our view model is creating the location detail view. And if you remember, if I'll go into this just to refresh your memory, we're doing this dynamically because we either embed it in a scroll view or not based on dynamic type, just to avoid confusion. I know I haven't seen this project in a little bit, so I had to remind myself. So anyway, we're passing in a view to the navigation link. Well, the new one takes in data, and then we use a navigation destination modifier at the bottom. So let me type them both out so you can see it, and I will comment it out because obviously they're both not going to work. So navigation link with a value and a label. So the value we're going to pass in is our location, because this is again data-based, and our location is of type DDG location, which as you saw has to conform to hashable, which we don't quite do. The label is going to be our location cell. So all this stuff we did is going to be the same. So I'm going to copy that and paste it. Now that I have that, I'm going to comment this out because Xcode's not going to like having both of those in there. Again, I'm just commenting it out so you can see both side by side. So navigation link where you pass in a value, look, DDG location has to conform to hashable. So let's go to our model, go to our DDG location, conforming to identifiable, just have it conform to hashable as well. Back to location list view, do a command B, that should clear that error. Cool, so the navigation link is just taking the piece of data. It's just taking the DDG location that we tap on. So that's the first step. The second one is to have a navigation destination modifier. So .navigation destination for and destination. So now this is where you pass in the data type, because again, it's data-driven navigation. Now our list only has a DDG location. That's our only data type. But you can imagine a more complex screen, maybe like the App Store that has multiple horizontal scroll views and collection views, and they have different data types. So you can navigate based on what data type you press to a specific screen. That's one benefit of it, is navigating based on the data type. Let me finish this code and I'll explain to you what is probably the main benefit. So this is where we do DDG location.self, and then the destination is location. Again, that's whatever location we tapped. And that is the location we had up here where we did the view model, create location detail view. So I'm going to copy that and paste that down there. All right, so basically this is just where we're going when we tap on it. Okay, not sure why I'm not getting that syntax highlighting, but that is the code. So what we did, switches to navigation stack. We changed our navigation link to take a value, which is a piece of data. That piece of data is our DDG location. The label of it is the same. And then we added a modifier, navigation destination, that says, hey, when we're of data type DDG location, this is our destination, and we pass in the location that we tapped, and this is the destination we're going to, and as well, we're dynamically creating our location detail view and passing in the location. So if you had multiple data types, say you had another data type of a DDG profile, right? Maybe we combined our screens somehow. Well, you would do another navigation destination for DDG profile, and then you would pass in a different destination. So that's how you navigate based on the different data types. The main benefit of this new data-driven navigation is the control you get when you navigate programmatically. For example, if you're deep into a navigation stack on the iOS settings, for example, where you're like 4 or 5 pages deep into settings, well, now you can just pop back to the root view, or maybe you want to pop back to the third view. With this navigation stack, you have way more control navigating programmatically. We're only one level deep, so we're not really like demonstrating that. But if you're wondering like, well, why did they get rid of navigation view and why did they switch to this new data-driven API? That is a big reason for it. And a quick note on supporting navigation stack, this does require iOS 16. So going back to my rant on, using this conditional everywhere, I would recommend not upgrading your navigation views to navigation stack, again, unless it's paramount for your product to do something, until your minimum target is iOS 16. Because you would have to have that conditional, that if available iOS 16, like here, you'd have to have it here, you'd have to have it here, and if your navigation's super complex, I imagine that would be a nightmare. So again, I would wait till iOS 16 is your minimum target, unless it's absolutely necessary for your product. Because the navigation view is so foundational, you're going to be dealing with just a nightmare of code all throughout your code base. Speaking of all throughout your code base, let's search for navigation view, because this was the only area where we were actually using it as, navigation. The other places we were using it for decoration, so to speak. So let's go to our profile view, get our preview going, open up our canvas. The only reason we're using navigation view, like in our profile view, is to get this nice profile header or a navigation bar. So these other areas, we can just, simulator crashes on the tab view. We can just replace navigation view with navigation stack because it is just purely aesthetics. We don't have to do any other code. Same thing with location detail view. When we're presenting it as a sheet, we just do this to get the not navigation sheet, navigation stack. I was talking and typing at the same time. Sometimes you do that. We're just doing this to get the dismiss button in the navigation bar. This is just in a preview. So like I said, anywhere we're using navigation view for like purely aesthetic reasons, just go ahead and switch it to navigation stack. You'll be fine there. The only place, like I said, we had to do more code was our location list view where we were actually doing some navigation. Okay, we haven't tested this yet. Let's run this and make sure the navigation still works. So location list view. Tap on Grace's Deli. Yep, navigation working fine. Cool. Stop this. The last thing we're going to do in this section, go to the location detail view. So we're going to play around a little bit with gradients and shadows. So let's pull up the preview here because I don't have to run it every time. We can see this in real time. Okay, so let's look at our action button H stack. Line 21, I'm going to command click into that, jump to definition. Okay, so location action button. Let's dig even deeper. That's what I want, one of these buttons. Circle is a foreground color of dot color. Just like our map balloon, we need to go dot fill with a color of brand primary dot gradient. And now I can comment out the foreground color. Now maybe you can see that gradient a little better, a little nicer, like the way that looks. Again, it's just super subtle. Now let's mess with shadows. So to do that, I'm actually going to put these on new lines because we're about to add a bunch of stuff here. So dot shadow with a style. And the style we can do dot drop, and you can see we have color, radius, X and Y. So I'm gonna hold option to give me all of those. So the color, I'm gonna do dot black. I believe that might be default, I might not need that. Radius, we'll say 5, and then X and Y, we'll do 2 and 2 of the drop shadow. So now look at that drop shadow. Of course, you can play with it if you go 0 and 0 for the X and Y, which I believe is the default. That's a more centered one. In fact, we're gonna just roll with the default for this. Radius of 5, you can play with the radius. That looks aggressive, obviously. You can do black dot opacity of 0.2 to maybe like tone it down a little bit. Now you can barely see it, 0.5. Anyway, you can play around with this. But what I like here is drop can change to inner, so an inner shadow. So now look what the inner shadow looks like. I think that's a pretty cool looking button. I don't think it fits with our style, but I could see an app that would use these type of buttons in this style. Okay, so I'm gonna comment this out. You can play around with the gradients and the shadows, the inner, the drop shadows on those buttons, but I wanna showcase another look you could go for. And you could combine these looks, but I feel like that might be a bit much. So I'm going to comment out foreground color white, and I'm going to do foreground style, and we'll do dot white, and then we'll do the same thing we did up there where we're putting these on new lines because we're going to have this shadow style. I'm going to copy this shadow style here. Inner black opacity 5. Let's just do black, not opacity. And that's an inner shadow on these. 5 looks to be a bit much for the radius. Let's try radius 2. Nah, that looks to be a bit much too. Radius 1. Okay, you can kind of see how they look like cutouts now. And then again, you can play with the radius, maybe 1.5. It obviously looks a bit much on the networking one, but you can see how that is giving it an inner shadow on our SF symbols here. I'm gonna zoom in like even more so you can like really see that. Okay, so that is the inner shadow, but I think the better look is the drop shadow. Okay, maybe the radius and maybe we need to do the opacity here. Opacity 0.5 to give it a more subtle look. And then maybe the radius should be, I don't know, 3. But you can see how you can play with this shadow, zoomed in a lot, to maybe make those icons pop out a little bit. I'm not saying this is a beautiful style. I'm just showing you how you can play around with the shadows and the gradients to create some cool looking buttons. iOS 16 introduced a lovely new addition to text field in SwiftUI, and that is a multi-line text field. As you can see in our profile screen, that's perfect for our bio. So we'll scroll down. I actually like our UI for the bio, so I don't know if I would replace it with this, but I love this new addition, and you can see the many uses of this multi-line text editor. So right now, we have this bio text editor. If we go down to here at the bottom to where it's at, it's a text editor with a text. We have a hard-coded frame of 100. We get the overlay of a rounded rectangle to get the stroke. Okay, so we're gonna recreate this as a multi-line text field. So back up to where we were, here it is, bio text editor. So I'm gonna comment this out. So above this, we're gonna do a text field, and you notice a brand new property called axis. So this is the axis in which it will expand. If I do the title key, we also get a placeholder that we don't have in our text editor. So we can do enter your bio, and then the binding is to the same binding, viewModel.bio. Again, that's the same thing down here that our text editor is bound to. Now here's the new thing, the axis. How do we want our text field to stretch? Well, we want it to go on the vertical axis. We want it to grow vertically. Get rid of this no user record. Okay, so now let me comment out the old bio text editor, and we can start playing around with this. So here you see enter your bio. Now, we don't have that rounded rectangle shape that we wanted. Maybe this is the style you like though. Maybe you do like this no border. Well, I want the border. So to do that, we just do .text field style .rounded border. Okay, this pop-up's gonna be annoying, but there's no way around it. So now we have enter your bio. I don't think this looks as nice as our 100 height frame that we had, but we're gonna get there. I'm gonna show you the evolution of this. So you see enter your bio. This is my bio. It needs to be long so that I can expand vertically. Let's go, I don't care about typos. One more line so I can see this grow, right? Okay, cool. So you can see it growing, but when there's nothing in there, right, the new user experience, it looks too skinny. So let's select all, delete. See, I don't like that look. You can give it a minimum and maximum height. So we want both of them, right? We want a minimum because, watch, you'll see. Line limit, and you can pass in a range here. So I want a minimum of 3, maximum of 6. And now you can see the minimum height is 3 and it will stretch to 6. Maybe we want to do minimum height is 4, right? You can play with it to see how big you want it. And let's not forget, let's take our focus modifier that we had on our text editor. And then also if we go down to our text editor, our accessibility, can't forget about that accessibility. Copy that, bring it up here and paste it there. That way our text field has completely replaced our bio text editor. Now, like I said, I'm not claiming that for our specific use, this is the much better way to go, but I did want to show you that there was now an alternative to just a normal hard-coded height text editor. You can have a text field that expands dynamically, and I'm sure you can imagine many use cases where that would be quite useful. Now, of course, I can't update the UI on the screen and not talk about gradient, right? So let's go into our DDG button, command click into it, jump to definition. Background is color.gradient. One little line there, and you can see the subtle gradient. I'm going to delete that. Watch the button. I'm going to delete that. Boom, it goes back to that solid color. I'm going to type gradient. Watch it again. Now you can see the subtle gradient. I don't know. I just love that.
The purpose of this video is to encourage you to check out other styles and ways of doing things when it comes to programming in SwiftUI and iOS. Later in the video, we're going to check out Apple's Fruit to App to compare and contrast with ours, which was based on my style and my preferences. And I've developed that style and preferences just over the years of working with other developers, seeing other content, just, seeing something and be like, ooh, I like that. And then I take that and adapt it into my style, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Over the years, that's how I've developed my style and preferences. And the point I want to get across in this video is to use me as one data point. Don't use the style that I've shown you as like the end all be all. That's the way Sean does it, so that's the way I should do it. No, I am just one data point in many. Using me and my style like that is how I think you'll get the most value. So I encourage you to learn from all sorts of Swift UI resources, content creators, to get different perspectives and see different styles. One that will help you just see how different people look at things. It will help you have a broader view of Swift and Swift UI. But it's very likely that when you do get a new job, it's going to be an existing code base and you're going to have to adapt to whatever styles and preferences they already have. I guess maybe over time, you can use your voice to maybe change and influence that style. But a lot of times that style is like set and you have to adapt. And if you have experience seeing various different styles and adapting, that will make things a lot easier when you have to adapt to a new code base. Now let's take a look at a screen in Apple's Fruta app, again, to compare and contrast to how we've done things. And it's an example of, a different way to do things. And maybe you agree with the way Apple did things. Maybe you like the way I did things better. Maybe it's a mix of both. That's the point. I want to show you two different styles and you come to the conclusion on your own as to what you like and what you prefer. Okay, so here I am in Xcode 13, by the way. So if you're watching this before Xcode 13 is official and you want to check out the Fruta app, you will need Xcode 13. So download the beta for that. But let's take a look here. Here's their smoothie view. And I'm going to run this in the preview to give you some context on what the view is. So we have this overall view, but it's in a scroll view that we can scroll and we see this and we have the Apple Pay button at the bottom. But back to the code, let's look at how they structured things because they're not using a view model where their view is just nothing but like view code. So I'm going to scroll down and show you. And this is what I talked about how, people have var body some view. Well, instead of having a separate struct like we do, they will have var container some view. So it's another variable on their view. And they'll have down here var content some view. And where body is the main things, but this var bottom bar, that is what they use to, piece together their view. This is the equivalent in our style of having all of our, view structs at the bottom, how we use to break out the view. If I pull up a screenshot of our location detail view, right, how we did our table of contents type stuff, that's the concept that they're doing, except they're not breaking it out. Well, they're breaking it out into, variables. And I'm going to code fold all these just to show you the structure. So maybe that'll help out to show you how they're doing it. So we'll code fold that one, code fold that one, code fold the content, code fold the bottom bar, and now they have their functions. So you can see the structure of their view. They have all their, state, environment, all that stuff, properties on the view. Their various kind of, refactoring of views is all in variables, all in the same view. And then they have their functions on the view as well. Now, the logic in their function, don't get me wrong, is in their model. We'll come back to that model in a second because it's not like a view model. But I'm going to uncode fold these now just to show you the organization. And if you haven't noticed, I'm not a fan of this. Again, this is subjective. This is me. I'm not saying Apple's code is bad. Like, don't get it twisted. The code organization and style, highly subjective. So of course, I'm not going to say Apple's code is wrong. It's just not my style. I don't like the way it's presented or how readable it is. And again, I want you to compare and contrast our project with Fruta's project. Come to your own conclusion. What do you like about Fruta? What do you like about ours? That kind of stuff. But the benefit here of having all these being variables, right, like the container, the var content, is they have access to all of these, right? All the presenting, order placed, all of the variables, right? So they don't have to pass them in as parameters like we do when we create our struct. So that is a benefit of doing it this way. But the reason I don't like it is just, again, organizationally and stylistically, I feel like this is a little bit cluttered. Kind of might be hard to figure out what's going on the screen. I shouldn't say it's hard. Like I've, kind of parsed what's going on. It's definitely doable. However, it took more effort than I like, right? I like it to be very easy to figure out what's going on the screen. But back to the model here, right? So normally we would have our view model is Apple Pay enabled or whatever. So again, the different style, if I click on, order smoothly in the model, they just have like one big model that handles like everything. That's certainly one approach. We broke our functionality out into very specific stuff for the screen. And one area where, this would benefit is if you're reusing a lot of the functions on various screens. Then having one central model, I like that better. For our purposes, we had a lot of stuff that was very segmented based on screens, very unique to each screen and view. So I felt our method worked better in our project. So again, it's not like one answer is right for every project. Maybe certain projects, a certain style is better for, and vice versa. But you can see their model is quite bigger than I would like. Again, personal preference. I'm going to scroll down. You see you have extensions on the model that have more stuff here, more extensions on the model. Now they are breaking it up with, marks, right, for organization purposes, private logic, but it's all in one file. And again, stylistically, maybe you like that, maybe you don't. But again, I'm pointing out the differences for you to make your own decision. So I'm not going to go too far in depth in this, but you can definitely check it out. This is Apple's sample code that has all the iOS 15 stuff in it. So definitely check it out. Again, run through the project. If you see stuff that they do that you like, take that, adapt that to your style. Take the stuff you like from our project, adapt that to your style. That's how you create your own. And that's what I'm recommending to wrap up this video. That's the whole point. Learn from a bunch of different resources and take what you like from each to develop your own style. Congratulations, you finished the course. And I know it was a little bit long, to be honest with you. It was a bit longer than I wanted it to be. And you saw how many threads and rabbit holes I didn't go down. I could have gone down many, many more, but hopefully now you see why I didn't. But that begs the question, where do you go from here? Well, aside from all the learnings hopefully you got, I think another big advantage of having done this course is now you have a base project to build on top of, play around with, and I can't stress how important that is. Maybe you've been watching some WWDC videos, or Apple releases a new thing like widgets last year. You're like, man, I want to play with widgets, but I don't have, a kind of real app to really test that with. Or if you have ideas on how to expand this product, you can try to implement those, because that's where the real learning comes in. Don't get me wrong, you have to start off by following videos and courses like this, but to go to that next level, you have to think of your own idea and then implement it without somebody telling you exactly how to do it. That's where you really learn. And let me give you some suggestions on how you can take this project and expand upon it to get that next level learning. Maybe you want to add the ability to favorite a user. That way you can have another screen that has a list of your favorite, developers, and then you can see where they're checked in at, just for ease of, maybe you want to see where Sean's at during WWDC, for ease of finding that. Or maybe you want to make a screen where profiles are searchable, so you can just search for Sean to see where I'm at if I'm checked in somewhere. That's another functionality you can add. An even bigger one, like I talked about earlier in the course, is this product could be expanded upon to multiple conferences. Like right now, we're focused on WWDC, and that's what you should do when you're launching an MVP. But if the product has success, maybe you want to expand it to New York City and try Swift New York. And now you basically do the same thing we did, except just for, New York City, around where the conference is, or whatever conference is located around you, all around the world. And then maybe you have a screen at the beginning where the user has to select their conference. And then when they select their conference, they go into that specific area. Like I mentioned before, maybe you want to create a widget for Dub Grub. It's great practice. And it's not just how to create a widget, but you also have to exercise your brain and okay, what would be a useful widget for Dub Grub? I'll leave that one up to you. Another great learning opportunity is adapting Dub Grub to iPad, right? We didn't touch on that, and I bet if you run it on the iPad, it looks like crap. So it's a great opportunity to adapt it to iPad. Maybe you want to spice up the UI a little bit, practice with some animations, or take our default alerts and create your own custom, nice-looking UI around that. Maybe you want to dive deeper into CloudKit. A part of CloudKit that we didn't get to touch on was CloudKit subscriptions. Essentially what that is as the data change, up in CloudKit, it will push, notifications to your app. If you've ever used your Notes app on your phone and then gone to your Notes app on the Mac, and then as soon as you open the Notes app, it receives all the changes, that's what's going on with CloudKit subscriptions. So you can imagine maybe we could do that with our locations, how people are constantly checking in, checking out. Maybe you could work it out some way to that as a subscription. That was a bit beyond the scope of this course. Again, this was already almost 80 videos. But again, if you want to take that next step, use this as a base to work with that and practice on that. Maybe you want to take accessibility even further, right? With VoiceOver and dynamic type, we just scratched the surface. You can really go deep with that on all the other accessibility stuff. And again, dynamic type, we only adapted it for one screen. You could go ahead and adapt it for the rest of the app to get practice. And then there's the big topic of version control, which again, we didn't touch on. That entails practicing uploading a project to GitHub. And now as you do explore with this, you can get practice creating a feature branch for if you do want to add, a widget in that feature. And then you can get practice creating a pull request and merging it. Again, having a base project like this is so valuable for you to experiment, play with, and build upon. Another thing I want to remind you of is you own this course. It wasn't like a one-time thing. If there were certain concepts you were unsure of, you can go back and watch any of these videos at any time. I mean, we covered a lot. I mean, we built a full product. We dabbled in MapKit. We dabbled in CloudKit. We integrated with UIKit with our photo picker. We drew custom shapes for our map annotations. We worked with all the network calls in CloudKit. We did voiceover and dynamic type and so much more. There was a lot covered in this course, and I know a lot of you probably just flew through this, only watched the videos once, didn't even rewind it. Maybe you didn't even follow along with the code at all, and that's fine for your first time through. But again, you own this course. You can go back through it as many times as you want. So if you're unsure of stuff, don't be afraid to go back and rewatch some videos. Another thing I want to point out going forward is SwiftUI's evolution. So with iOS 15 here just announced this July, we are on the third major update of SwiftUI. And don't get me wrong, it's coming along very nicely, but it's still very, very young. And a lot of iOS developers, while yes, they may have played around with it, haven't really built serious apps with it yet. One, because it's so new and they may work at companies that have to support older iOSs, so they literally couldn't adopt SwiftUI. But my point is, over the years that is going to change and more serious apps will be built in SwiftUI. And what that means is more and more best practices will be cleared up. We'll have time to experiment with different things. So my point is, SwiftUI is going to change. Like my style and my thoughts that you heard in this course, I'm willing to bet over the next couple years, I will change my tune on some things as, people get more experience, more practice. Just SwiftUI is out in the wild more. Things are going to change. So that's the one piece of advice. If you're diving into this wonderful world of SwiftUI and really putting some time into it, expect change, be ready for it. Like Bruce Lee says, be like water. Just go with the flow and expect the change. That's the price you pay for being on the cutting edge of things. But I don't know. In my opinion, that's a fun place to be. Next, I'd love to hear feedback. I mean, this was my fourth course, and I like to think I'm getting better and better with each course, but by no means do I claim these are perfect. Like I said, I made about 80 videos. They're not all going to be bangers, right? Some of them are going to be duds, but that's what I want to hear about. Where did this course fall short? And I'm a big boy. I can take it as long as you're not like an ass about it. Just give me some constructive criticism on areas of the course you thought could have been improved so I can take that feedback and, implement it in my future courses. Don't get me wrong, I like hearing the nice feedback, but oftentimes the bad feedback is more helpful. Unless the nice feedback is like, hey, I really liked how you did this in the course. And that, gives me reinforcement to do that in future courses. So here's my email, here's my Twitter handle, my DMs are open. Feel free to reach out. And speaking of Twitter, if you did enjoy this course and you found it really, really valuable, you got a lot out of it, I guess my one request would be to help spread the word, help share it. Now that I've gone full-time on this YouTube thing, these courses are how I earn my living. So as you know, personal testimonials and stuff really help out. And if you tag me in them on Twitter, I'll hop in, comment, join the conversation, maybe give it a retweet. But I would really appreciate that. That definitely helps out. So that wraps it up. Thank you again for sticking with me through all these videos. I hope you got a ton of value out of it. And again, don't be afraid to go back and review some videos. And I hope to see you in the next course.